Good evening, my friends. Make yourself comfortable, maybe with a blanket, maybe with a cup in your hands. Tonight, we're not looking at horoscopes. We're chasing the myths behind the zodiac. Every sign you know today once carried a story, a god, a monster, a bargain between love and death, a lion that roared against mortality, twins who refused to be parted, a cup that never emptied, a sting sharp enough to bring down a giant. Some tales are tragic, some bizarre, all unforgettable, and that is what makes the zodiac more than a calendar in the sky. It is a library written in stars. As always, I'd love to know, what's happening around you right now? Are you winding down for sleep, studying, working late, or just letting these words drift into the quiet? However you're listening, I'm glad you're here. So let the night grow still around you. Step outside in your imagination into the crisp air of a starry evening. And look up. That magnetic pull you feel, searching for shapes in the dark. The ancients had a name for ectasterism, the art of turning stories into stars. Not cold sparks of fire, but memories, warnings, promises, moments too great for earth alone. Many exist because someone, often a mortal, met a fate so extraordinary, so haunting, that the gods fixed it forever in the heavens. The idea was both gift and sentence, a kind of immortality that freezes you forever in the pose of your most defining moment, triumphant or humiliating. It is no accident that so many of these stories hinge on transformation. At the point of crisis, men into animals, gods into mortals, mortals into stars. For the great transformation was both punishment and preservation. Imagine what it meant for ancient peoples to stand on a quiet hilltop, to point toward a crooked scatter of lights and tell the tale of how those lights came to be. They spoke of heroes who wrestled monsters only to die young, of women wronged by gods, repaid with a place in the sky, of creatures who fought for causes they barely understood, immortalized in shapes that would outlast every empire on earth. In the telling, the constellations became less like decoration and more like living witnesses, silent, glittering archives of the best and worst in both human and divine condition. The zodiac, then, is not a serene astrological wheel spinning gently above us. It is a battlefield memorial, a love letter, a gallery of betrayals and last stands. Each sign is a preserved fragment of the larger, messier story, and together they form a cosmic anthology of human experience refracted through the Greek imagination. We begin with Aries, the golden ram whose gift was both rescue and doom, and we will travel the full circle through to Pisces, the twin fish bound by a cord, fleeing for their lives. As we go, we will see how the ancients, with all their flaws and ferocities, chose to mark their world, not just in marble temples, not just in the ink of scrolls, but in the permanent, unblinking lights that wheel above our heads every night. The story of Aries begins not in the heavens, but on the green slopes and smoky hearths of ancient Colchis and Boeotia. Yet in the original myth, those qualities belong not to the human hero but to the animal itself, the divine creature that acted without question when called. And yet even in celebration, the myth carries shadows. The very act that immortalized Aries also contained loss. Hells fall into the sea, the sacrifice of the ram in the sacred grove, the loneliness of Phrixus in a foreign land. It is as if the constellation itself reminds mortals beginnings are rarely clean. They are born from endings, from severed ties and irreversible choices. The Golden Fleece, later the prize of Jason and his Argonauts, was itself a relic of that cost. Every retelling of their voyage pulled the thread back to Aries, to the shining wool once draped over a creature that carried a boy from death to life and then laid down its own life without resistance. To the Greeks, placing Aries in the heavens was gratitude and record-keeping. The ram's shape was fixed in the unchanging sphere, so that every year, at the same season, its story would return. The stars marking its horns and back were like letters of a permanent inscription, written across the sky instead of on stone. Impossible for wind or rain to erode, it was a way of turning the future through the past. If the ram had come once in a moment of peril, perhaps its return in the spring sky meant help could come again, unseen until the very moment it was needed. And so Aries begins the zodiac not with the perfection of creation mythi, but with the messy human reality of survival. A rescue that does not save everyone. A hero who is not a hero in the usual sense. A creature that does its duty only to vanish into memory. That is the truth the Greeks wove into their constellations, and it is the truth that still lingers when Aries rises over the horizon. That courage often arrives in the form we least expect, that rescue is never without cost, and that even in loss, the act of leaping into the unknown can change everything. When the Greeks lifted their eyes to the slow, broad sweep of stars forming the shape we call Taurus, they were not simply tracing the outline of an animal. They were stepping into one of the most unsettling and magnificent episodes in the uneven record of Zeus's pursuits. In an age when God still walked among mortals, and the sea was as much a road as the earth, there lived a Phoenician princess named Europa, daughter of King Agenore. Her beauty was not the blazing kind that conquers a room. It carried its own weather, a quiet gravity that made the world feel briefly more alive. She lived by the shore, in a land of warm winds and salt air, and it was there while gathering flowers with her companions in a meadow spilling down toward the beach that her story veered into the eternal. Zeus, looking down from Olympus, saw her, and decided he must have her. This kind of decision, for the king of the gods, was not weighed or questioned. It came with the certainty of a storm rolling toward shore. Yet Europa was mortal, guarded, and Zeus knew his usual forms would not suffice. So he reshaped himself, not eagle, not cloud, not flame, but bull, a white bull of such impossible beauty that even the wary would pause. His hide shone like moonlight, his horns curved with a craftsman's perfection. His eyes held a strange gentleness that belied the force coiled within him. He wandered among the king's herds until he seemed just another animal at the meadow's edge waiting. Europa noticed his stillness first. While the other cattle moved, tearing at grass, this bull watched her. Patient, unthreatening, she reached out a hand. He did not shy away. Her fingers brushed the warmth of his muzzle. Her companions laughed, marveling at the calm creature. They draped flowers around his neck, wove garlands between his horns. His breathing was slow, deep, the way the sea breathes before a wave. And when Europa climbed onto his back, it felt no more dangerous than sitting astride a sun-warmed stone. She could not have known she had already crossed the threshold into myth. The moment she settled, the bull surged, not the placid steps of a grazing beast, but a sudden, powerful drive toward the shore. The girls screamed, his hooves pounding across the sand. Before they could reach her, he plunged into the surf. The sea rose around them in sprays of white. But the bull did not falter. He struck out into open water made for both land and sea. Europa clung to his neck. Garlands slipped into the waves. Salt winds stung her eyes as the coastline dwindled. Dolphins leapt in their wake, escorting royalty. The seas shifted green, blue, then deep violet of the Mediterranean. No one could say how long they traveled. The bull's great body cutting through waves. The sun shifting overhead. Silence save for water's rush and the sound of her breath. At last, a new shore. Crete fragrant with cypress and pine. There, the white hide dissolved. The bull's form changed. Zeus stood, revealed, his eyes burning with victory of possession. On that Cretan shore, Europa's life was altered forever. She became mother of 3 sons. Among them Minos, who would one day build the labyrinth that held the Minotaur. The bull that carried her was remembered not in warning, but in honor. So the Greeks fixed its shape in the sky, not the man, the animal, head lowered in eternal charge, stars marking horns and shoulders, the rest fading into darkness, as if forever emerging from the sea. Taurus was never just decoration scratched in the night. Its rising was a signal, a reminder, a declaration. It appeared when earth awoke from winter, when pastures filled with grazing animals, when plows bit into soil. The bull among the zodiac was more than Zeus's abduction of Europa. It was fertility, strength returning to the fields, the raw power that tilled and sustained life. The brightest stars, the warm red glow of Aldebaran, the cluster of the Pleiades shimmering near its shoulder, were not ornaments. They were markers, for sailors to time their voyages, for farmers to judge their planting. In a world without clocks, these stars were the living hands of the year's great dial. But Taurus was not bound to a single myth. The Greeks, like the Babylonians before them, layered constellations with many stories. Some saw the Cretan bull the beast Heracles was sent to capture, not merely hunting but confronting something untamed, something that belonged both to Landi and to God. Others saw a darker shadow, the bull that Pasiphae, cursed by Poseidon, was made to desire, and from that curse the Minotaur was born, half man, half bull. A child who would one day stalk the labyrinth beneath Minos's palace. The Greeks did not worry about contradiction. The sky could hold them all. In temples and marketplaces, Taurus was invoked with awe and familiarity. Bulls were common. Farmers yoked them. Priests sacrificed them. Artisans carved them into altars. But the bull in the sky was something else. The perfected image, the archetype, the eternal bull that never aged, never weakened, never bowed to the plow. To place it in the heavens was to strip away dust and sweat, to leave only forced power that could cross seas with a girl on its back, power that could bear curses without breaking, power that anchored the turning of the year itself. When Taurus rose in the east just after sunset, it was like a great gate swinging open in the sky. The horns pointed forward, the head lowered, charging into the months ahead. And in those nights, the Hyades glittered faintly in its face, raindrops of stars, a sign to the Greeks that storm season had begun, that the skies would water the seeds in the ground, a world where a child's life could be bent or broken by the word of an oracle, where the gods moved their pieces on the board of mortal affairs without apology. To understand why a ram shines at the head of the zodiac, we must descend into a web of family rivalry, divine intervention, and desperate escape. It begins with a boy named Phrixus and his sister Hel, children of Athamas, king of Boeotia, and Nephel, a cloud nymph sent by the gods to be his bride. Nephel, whose name meant cloud, was a creation of Hera, shaped in the likeness of another woman to deceive a wandering king. And though she was divine, her life in the mortal palace was neither peaceful nor secure. When Athamas turned his affections to Ino, a mortal woman whose ambition was matched only by her cunning, Nephel's place faltered. Ino saw Nephel's children as obstacles to her own son's rise, and the legends say she hatched a plan ruthless and patient. She conspired to bring famine to the land, spoiling seed grain before it was sown. The people starved. When the king went to Delphi, Ino bribed the messengers. The oracle's answer returned. The famine would only lift if Phrixus, Athama's own son, was sacrificed, and so the machinery of doom began to turn. Phrixus, still a boy, stood on the altar, the knife ready, the crowd hushed, the air thick with incense and fear. But the gods, or one god in particular, had other designs. Nephel called for help, and a miraculous creature appeared. A ram, fleece spun from gold, wings strong enough to lift 2 children. This was Chrysomalos, a gift some said from Poseidon, others Hermes. Its sudden arrival was so shocking the priests dropped their knives. The crowd fell back in awe. The ram knelt. Phrixus and Hel climbed onto its back, and with a surge of muscle and wind it leapt into the sky. The sea roared beneath them. Wind tore at their clothes. The sun glittered on the waves, dizzying, merciless. This was no gentle ascent to glory. It was a flight for survival, and the danger was not yet done. They flew eastward toward Colchis, but the journey came with loss. Crossing the strait between the Aegean and the Black Sea, Hel slipped. Perhaps overcome by height, perhaps too weak to hold on, she fell into the waters below. That place became forever known as the Hellespont, the Sea of Hell. Even in stories where gods intervene, not all are saved. Alone, Phrixus clung to the ram. It carried him to Colchis, where King Aeates, son of Helios, welcomed him with unexpected generosity. In gratitude, Phrixus did something reverent and strange. He sacrificed the ram, the very creature that saved him. The fleece radiant beyond belief was hung at a sacred grove, guarded by a dragon. One day, it would lure Jason and the Argonauts into their own perilous tale. Aries in the sky became both tribute and testimony. Zeus fixed the ram among the stars to honor its courage and service. Each spring, as the sun crossed Aries, its story returned. But the truth is complicated. This is not only salvation, the loss, the drowning of a sister, the survival of a boy spared by a god, and the sacrifice of a faithful rescuer. To the ancients, Aries was a reminder rescue comes at a cost. Survival is never without debt, and the heavens remember both light and shadow. When the Greeks traced the stars of Aries, they did not merely see a horned animal. They recalled a chain of events, a kingdom's politics, a stepmother's spite, a god's intervention, and the courage of a mythical beast colliding in one desperate escape. Aries rises in the east at spring's turning when the earth shrugs off winter's damp lethargy, when life returns to the fields. To the ancients, no coincidence. The ram was savior and herald, the first to arrive in the zodiac cycle, leading the parade of constellations that marked the agricultural year. Its reappearance was a silent announcement: prepare the plow. Trust that warmth will return. Remember, survival is possible even after long months of scarcity. In Greek imagination, Aries carried more than Phrixus' rescue. It became a symbol for bold beginnings, the kind of courage that leaps without calculating odds. The ram's leap from the altar, its wings slicing through the air, became a model of decisive action when hesitation meant death. This was not the quiet patience of Virgo, not the measured balance of Libra, but sudden necessary force that tears a person out of danger and sets them on a new path. In astrology, much later, Aries would stand for leadership, energy, and a certain impulsive fearlessness. These patterns were practical tools for navigation and agriculture. Yes, but the Greeks could not look at them without remembering Europa's ride across the waves, without recalling the strangeness of a god choosing to wear an animal's skin. Every bright star was a spark of that story. The stillness in the meadow, the sudden surge toward the shore, the foam breaking over horns as they cut through the surf. In the older Mediterranean world, long before Greek poets gave Zeus's name to the rider of the bull, the animal itself had been sacred in a dozen other tongues. The Minoans danced with them in ritual vaulting, leaping over their horns in feats that felt more like prayer than sport. The Babylonians saw in Taurus the force that marked the start of their new year, the great beast that stood guard at the gates of spring. The Greeks inherited all of this. They discarded nothing. They folded it into the version they carried forward. Their Taurus was both a stolen moment between God and mortal, and the distilled image of animal strength that every culture along the sea's rim had revered. To the night watcher in a Greek port or on a mountain farm, Taurus in the sky was both familiar and untouchable. You could own a bull, harness it, feed it, even sacrifice it. But the one above, the one with eyes made of fire and shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of a season, was beyond your reach. And when its horns cut across the black dome of the sky, each year they drew a line between mortal and eternal, between the herds in the pasture and the flawless bull that would never die. It was not Zeus they fixed in the heavens, not Europa, not Minos. It was the form that made them all possible, the bull itself, forever moving, forever leading the charge into the next turning of the year. The constellation of Gemini comes from a story so bound to the Greek sense of kinship and honor that it resists being reduced to a single moment. To trace its shape in the night is to enter the life of two brothers, Castor and Pollux. Their bond carried them beyond the reach of mortality. Their story begins in the royal household of Sparta. Their mother, Queen Leda, was famed across the Aegean not only for her beauty but for the strange, divided fate of her children. On the same night, two fathers claimed her bed: King Tyndareus, her mortal husband, and Zeus, who came disguised as a swan. From this union, two sets of twins were born: Helen and Pollux, children of Zeus, touched with immortality; Castor and Clytemnestra, children of Tyndareus, entirely mortal. A family tangled by blood before their lives had even begun. Castor and Pollux grew inseparable, They trained in the arts of nobleman wrestling, hunting, horsemanship, war. Each boy's gift balanced the other. Castor master of horses, precise with spear, strong in combat. Pollux unmatched in boxing, his blows carrying divine weight. Together they formed a partnership no warrior could challenge. Their fame spread beyond Sparta. Poets sang of them. Sailors called on them for protection at sea, swearing they had seen the brothers' figures appear in stormlight, guiding ships toward safety. But no mortal life, no matter how gifted, escaped the quarrels of men. The brothers clashed with their cousins, Idas and Lynceus, over women. Versions differ, but all agree it was pride and possession. Two pairs of warriors, each convinced of their right, neither willing to yield. The quarrels swelled into violence. Spears flew. In the clash, Castor was struck down. He fell not as a hero in triumph, but as a brother watching his life slip into shadows. Pollux fought on until his enemies lay dead or scattered, but when the dust cleared, he found no comfort in survival. Standing over Castor's body, he felt the weight of immortality he carried, a gift he had never asked for. No sentence. For what use is eternal life when half of yourself is gone? He turned to Zeus, not as a worshipper to a god, but as a son to a father, and begged to share his immortality with Castor. In some tellings, Zeus granted it, dividing their existence, one day among the gods on Olympus, the next in the underworld among the shades, never wholly apart again. In others, Zeus raised them together into the night sky, fixed side by side where no blade could part them. The stars of Gemini became their likeness, two bright points close in the darkness, each carrying the memory of the other. To the Greeks, they were not only guardians of sailors, not only patrons of athletes, they were proof that devotion could overcome death, that a bond forged in life might hold beyond the grave. The sight of the twin stars was a vow kept at the highest cost, a loyalty no war, no God's will could undo. To those who read the sky as a ledger, the heads of Gemini were never mere ornaments. They were a presence, a compact between brothers burning in firelight. Each time they rose together in late winter skies, a murmur spread through harbors and hill towns. The Dioscuri had returned. Silent watch again over streets, fields, and masts. A reassurance that a promise made in grief would be honored as many times as the year could bear. Their names traveled farther than most men, carried by sailors who were no poets yet spoke like poets. When storms lifted seas into walls, when rigging shook, when the world narrowed to a deck, men swore they saw strange blue flames, a cold fire crawling along spars and stays. It did not burn. It did not obey the wind. They said the twins had come, that Castor and Pollux stood with them, that loyalty itself had stepped aboard. Captains prayed aloud to gods unseen, because twin lights on a mast in a storm turned the heart from calculation to gratitude. This reputation did not begin with fishermen. It ran deeper back to older tales. The voyage of the Argo, when sea itself decided if the ship would live or sink. A boxer king named Amycus demanded all strangers fight him. Pollux stepped forward. No bravado, just fists in the sand, the surf counting the rounds. When the king lay broken, the Argonauts returned to their work with calm. Men who knew storms do not respect victory. Later came a night when wind and water conspired to end them. Fires crept over the yardarms. Men who had never prayed learned how, and the twins were said to have stood shoulder to shoulder in lightning. The storm relented just enough for oars to bite. The keel held its line. From such episodes, the cult of the brothers grew. So later, when a small craft battled beyond its build, and an old steersman whispered their names, and the glow returned, the crew believed. The favor of Castor and Pollux was not chance. It was a pledge, continuing. On land, their presence worked differently, teaching by image, not command. In Sparta, boys learned to trust the man to their right as themselves, and the Dioscuri were carved into temple friezes, painted on shields, horsehair crests catching the sculptor's imagined wind. The pattern of two turned into an emblem of how a line should hold. They had centuries where bread and wine were set out each year, Feasts called theoxania tables left empty to the eye, but filled in spirit. Athens called them the Aenaics, the lords. They had their precinct. And in small towns, far from great debates, stood little shrines, 2 stars scratched into stone, so a shepherd on a ridge or a traveler in a dangerous pass could pause. And remember, strength comes in pairs, and the gods remember those who do not abandon one another. Their fame crossed into Italy. The Romans, slow to love, hard to impress, took to the twins with speed. They built a temple to Castor and Pollux in the Forum. Each year, a river of horsemen flowed in procession, bronze glinting in the July sun, young men of equestrian order riding 2 by 2. They dismounted at the sanctuary steps, offered thanks for discipline that keeps formations from breaking, and panic from spreading when armies learn truths they never wished to know. Coins bore their faces, helmets topped with stars, official memory ringing hand to hand in markets and taverns. And if you set the coin flat to catch the light, you could almost see the argument it made. That a city is safest when it upholds examples of brothers who keep promises even when gods change the terms. That idea seeped everywhere, into oaths before games, into rituals at city gates, into the reluctance of craftsmen to sign work with a single name when 2 had shared the labor. The twins appeared in poems recited at banquets and in laws that rewarded men who bore the burden of another's crime, or men who returned a fallen comrade's body instead of counting the odds for their own escape. Because every society teaches best by example, not by statute. And the example of Castor the horse-tamer and Pollux the boxer was a way of saying aloud, but devotion is not sentiment but habit, a daily readiness to step forward when stepping back would be easier. Their myth carried a precision that made philosophers nervous, for immortality is usually simple. And yet the brothers lived under an arrangement that divided their days between the sunlight of Olympus and the dark of Hades. Audiences felt the unease of that rhythm, because the detail mattered. It did not flatter. It suggested that even a gift from Zeus can be a burden when the one you love cannot share it fully. And so the bargain became a procession, mornings and midnights, feast and funeral, as if the sky itself had been asked to alternate just to keep a vow intact. This is why the sight of their stars side by side did not feel like reassurance alone. It also felt like instruction, a lesson in the costs that words draw down when spoken in earnest, a reminder that the best pledges complicate a life rather than simplify it, that the meaning of a name endures only so far as someone pays for it with days and nights and breath. Astronomers wrote their appearances carefully. Farmers, pilots, they observed that the brighter twin later called Pollux rose with warm steadiness, while the other, Castor, seemed whiter, colder. They wrote down how the twins stood among winter's bright company near the white dog, the great hunter, and the charioteer with his sharp star at the shoulder, a geometry that guided sailors who steered by constellations instead of instruments, and one that also guided farmers who sowed barley and watched the skies for decent weather to shear sheep. When the twins cleared the eastern roofs in long, cold evenings, it was time to consider some tasks and postpone others, to mend hulls that would soon cross dangerous waters, to gather crews, to share out profit and loss before tempests frayed at sea. The same pair shone high at midnight when the year leaned hard toward its turning. Steady companions in the clear vault over mountain snow, shepherds spoke in proverbs. A flock fares better when men remember the twins and pair the young with the experienced, not leaving life to luck. In pottery, in stone reliefs, in bronze mirrors tucked into chests of wealthy women artists, worked their story into the curves of daily life. 2 young men, seated together with spears between their knees, or riding side by side, quiet satisfaction on their faces, like men who do their work without audience, or standing with stars above their hair, as if they had only just stepped down from heaven to look at something that needed attention. These images were domestic and public at once, a language repeated from banquet hall to stable yard, so that boys who had not yet chosen friends and men who had chosen badly were both reminded that the world expects you to hold to the one who stands with you. The brothers appear also in the tales of their sister. When Helen was taken from Sparta by Theseus, still young, Castor and Pollux marched into Attica. They recovered her, and in her place they carried off Theseus's mother, Ethra. It told the Greeks the twins were protectors of family honor, but also participants in the arithmetic of reprisals that governed their age. Later, when a cattle raid turned into feud with their cousins Idas and Lynceus, that arithmetic ran to its limit. Castor fell. Pollux answered death by dividing his life across two realms so the partnership could hold. Epithets followed them like banners: saviors of sailors, tamers of horses, guardians of youths, patrons of the way the body learns skill through repetition, and the mind learns courage by watching the man beside it refuse to run. Their cult was not secretive, nor ecstatic. It asked for feasting and fair dealing, for twin cups filled to the same mark, for simple justice in contracts, for steady hands in the press of battle. When a chorus sang of them at festival, you heard the balance of their gifts. The one whose knuckles knew the weight of a fist, the one whose hands knew the language of reins, and always, behind the praise, the quiet truth, that they had avoided the poison that creeps into brothers' hearts when courts and poets say one is favored. The myth insisted that Pollux's share of divinity did not make him careless with his mortal twin, and Castor's mortality did not sour him against the god-blooded youth who shared his bed and bread. All this made the constellation more than a signpost. It was an instruction, a Siddhic curriculum conducted in starlight. If you wanted to teach a boy why he must stay in line, or return for the fallen, or sit beside a grieving friend, you pointed to two lights traveling together, and taught him the world is held not only by laws, but by paired loyalties. That when a city is lucky, its men mirror the twins. That when a ship is lucky, the bow watch keeps faith with the tiller, because each knows his life is braided with the others. In this way, Gemini became both habit of mind and discipline of heart, a story that refused to let affection be cheap. And as the brothers' stars cleared haze above sea lanes, or hung above frostbright fields, the same thought returned, again and again. That devotion remembers the bargain it made even when the day has been long, and the night promises no relief. The story shifts. It begins in the marshland at Lerna. The ground breathes. The water stinks of rot. Reeds rattle in small winds. Pools reflect a grey sky that refuses to open. Here the hydra makes its den, coiled in shadows under a bank, roots hanging like ropes. The second labor of Heracles sends him here. He comes with a club and a sword. His nephew follows with a torch and a cart. They move like men who know the air will turn against them. The swamp swallows their steps. Frogs fall silent. Birds draw back from the smell of old blood. Heracles finds the hydra by listening. He knows the beast does not sleep long. A hiss rolls over water. Then a surge. 9 heads lift like black lilies opening. Eyes burning low. Teeth gleaming in a wet grin. Heracles stands his ground. He strikes. One neck breaks under the club. The head drops into weeds. The stump spits steam and blossoms. 2 heads rising where one was lost. He learns fast. He strikes again and again. The marsh fills with the sound of wood on bone. Every blow breeds more mouths. The hydra slides across mud, testing the line with cold patience. Heracles gives ground to firmer soil. The club booms against skull after skull. The air tastes of iron and sulfur. Iolaus runs fire through dry brush. He waits. Heracles pins a neck with his knee, hacks it through. Iolaus is there with flame. The stump shrieks. Sealed in fire. No new heads. They form into rhythm. Cut, burn, step, breathe. The hydra thrashes. Roots tear. Water slaps banks. Its tail whips through reeds, sending mud skyward. The work is ugly. Steady. Sweat blinds the hero. Smoke claws his throat. He does not stop. The monster yields a little. Then the marsh answers with another voice. A crab crawls from black water. Shell cracked like a broken shield. Hera sent it her hatred for Heracles unending. The crab moves sideways. Deliberate. Calm. It finds the hero's ankle. Clamps down. Chitin bites flesh. Heracles staggers in the mud. Drops his guard. The hydra lunges. A jaw closes on the shoulder. The club shudders against the skull. Iolaus sears another stump. The stink of burnt hydra rolls over the pool. The crab does not release. Its legs churn mud to paste, pulling as if it could drag a man under by will alone. Heracles looks down through smoke and blood. He shifts his weight, drags his heel. The shell cracks with a flat report. A second blow ends the movement. The crab folds into the mud. It slides back toward the water like a broken pot. Hera watches and refuses to waste the gesture. The crab had done what it could. It had obeyed. It had entered a fight that belonged to beings far larger than itself, and that was enough for a place in the sky. The goddess fixed the small shape among the stars, the curve of a shell, the splay of legs, a faint scatter hard to find unless you already know where to look. The labor runs to its end. Heracles and Iolaus work the method to the last head. Cut burn until the necks are black glass. The immortal head is buried under a heavy rock by the road to Argos. The swamp settles back into silence. Steam rises in thin veils and thins away. Somewhere above the mist, the small figure of Carcinus has taken its watch. The heavens hold the record of the bite on the ankle and the answer that crushed it. The constellation carries that record through clear nights and over winter fields. The marsh forgets. The sky does not. Cancer rises where the year turns hot. In old calendars, its stars stood at the gate of summer. Priests watched that part of the sky, and beside a day that returned like the tide they wrote a single word, solstice. The sun climbs, then pauses, then begins to fall again. The Greeks gave the pause a body a crab. It creeps sideways, as if the sky itself must shift its weight before it changes course. The shape is faint. The outline, spare. You must know what you are looking for. In a sky crowded with heroes and monsters, Cancer keeps a small room. That is its force. The quiet signs often do the hardest work. They hold the hinge. Farmers and sailors learned Cancer by feel as much as by sight. The stars here are not loud. They whisper through haze. Near the heart of the figure hangs a pale cloud. The eye can gather it on a clear night. The Greeks called it Precep, the manger. Two dim stars graze at its edge. Asellus Borealis to the north, Asellus Australis to the south. The little asses. Together they feed from the cluster as if the sky kept its own trough. Shepherd said, if the manger blurred while the rest of the night was sharp, rain was coming. Pilots watched it from the stern, counted that blur as a warning shortened sail. Aratus named the place in verse, like a weather mode set to music. Ptolemy fixed the same light in a catalogue that read like a ledger. Centuries apart, the signs remain the same. Look for the small cloud. Judge your day. Old stories gathered around those two asses, as if the cluster were a half. One tale told that gods rode humble mounts to battle, and their braying turned the will of giants. Another said the little beasts were honored for simple service, during a march when the strong were tired and waterskins ran low. The details change with the teller. The intention does not. The heavens held a lesson valuing plain labor over the noise of glory. Two dim lights, a shared bowl. Men in ports and men in fields trusted a pattern that asked little in return. Be steady, keep company, know when to feed and when to move. Cancer's faintness became part of its biography. Hera set the crab among the signs for obedience, not success. Its stars do not blaze like the bullseye or the scorpion's heart. They hang like a memory spoken under breath. That suits the scene at Lerna. The creature did not change the battle. It distracted a giant for a breath and was broken underfoot. The goddess placed a trace of that act where no wind could erase it. Greek listeners understood the shade of praise. Some efforts did not finish a story. They mark it. A grip on an ankle, a bruise that throbs the next day, a token from a queen who counts loyalty even when the field belongs to someone else. In the language of the sky, Cancer held the path of the moon. Hellenistic writers called the sign the House of Selene. Night by night, the goddess poured her cold light over that reach of the ecliptic. She gave the crab a second task, to govern the tides of sleep and shore. to preside over kitchens where steam rose in summer, where mothers laid infants on cool stone, to watch doorways when heat kept them open until dawn. Later philosophers taught, souls descend to earth through this gate. They return through the road across the circle in Capricorn. The crab and the seagull became markers of arrival and ascent, one looking inward, one looking away, the pair holding the traffic of breath. Cancer once named a latitude where the sun stood at highest noon. A traveler walking that line walked the edge of matched lands that smoked in summer. Greeks and Romans drew it across parchment, called it the tropic, the turning. The word still stands. Though the slow drift of Earth has moved the solstice sun elsewhere, the name is like an old smell in a shirt washed 100 times. It never leaves. Men once stood in fields when the sun reached the crab. They knew the worst heat was near. They worked at dawn, tied vines before noon, broke bread in shade, and waited for the first inch of evening. Artists gave the crab a stony grace the stars refuse. The sky's pattern is a sketch, but mosaics show a full body ready to move. In Sicilian villas, floors glitter with a crab on blue tesserae. Tiny bubbles stitched around its legs. Coins stamped its shell beside a magistrate's name. Painted calendars set the crab on the line of the longest day. Beside Ita Reaper bending over barley, a girl pouring water into a jar, a fisherman repairing a net. No one points to heroes. Everyone points to work that keeps a year alive. The sign carries no spear. It carries a season. Mariners steered by brighter guides, but they never forgot the crab. Gemini guided them out of winter. Leo would carry them into harvest. Cancer was the pause between. A week of calms could trap a Holland mid-sea like a fly in amber. Crews lent patience there. Oars out, sails slack. The sky a white bowl by day, a glass lid by night. The crab kept them company through that long-held breath. 2 dim asses, a faint manger, a story that said the small can be faithful through hours that leave no trace in sagas. A captain who had buried friends took comfort in that. He did not need omens that roared. He needed a map that respected endurance. So the Greeks read Cancer as the zodiac's worker without applause. It straps the season to the year, marks a limit the sun cannot cross, teaches by example, not by threat. Where Gemini shows a vow shouted into death, and Leo will roar strength given shape, the crab makes room for both. With a sideways shuffle and a steady grip. Part of the year is fight, part is harvest, part is wait. Cancer remembers the wait and gives it a sign. Leo begins in the rough hills west of Mycenae. The earth is thin, the wind cuts low through scrub. Vineyards cling to slopes like handwriting that refuses to fade. Goat bells carry in the afternoon. Travelers keep to the road, measuring distance by dry stream beds and old olive trees. In that country, a single roar could empty a field and close a door. The Nemean lion had come down from its ravine. It killed at the edge of daylight. It dragged oxen from yokes. It broke doors with the shove of one forepaw. It left tracks that looked like bowls pressed in dust. Stories of it moved faster than carts. People spoke in rationed fear. Small sentences traded at wells and stalls. It lives in a cave with 2 mouths. It cannot be cut. It takes spears as thorns. It leaves no body whole. Eurystheus heard the reports in his hall at Terence. He saw in them a problem one that could earn him credit, without using his own hands. Heracles had returned from exile with strength that unsettled the balance. The king set the first labor with calm detachment. Go to Nemea, find the animal, remove it from the earth. No speech about honor, no glory of the house, only an order, and a seal pressed in wax. Heracles accepted like a man accepts a debt he cannot refuse. He took a bow, a quiver, a club cut from wild olive. He walked out of the gate before sunrise, never looked back at the walls. He entered Nemea by the road past Cleonae. Shepherds watched from a distance made the sign that sends blessing after dangerous travelers. The land smelled of thyme and dust. He found the first carcass by flies, a cow torn at the neck, no bite marks of the bone. a hide peeled back like a blanket. He knew the beast did not feed from hunger. It practiced its strength on living things to learn resistance. He knelt, ran his hand over the dead animal, as if to apologize for using it as lesson, then rose and studied the ground. Tracks showed rhythm of weight and ease, deep impressions followed by stretches where claws barely touched. The cat knew silence. Arrows serve men in most wild places, but Heracles. Heracles met the lion on a shelf of rock where the road narrows and scrub breaks. The beast stepped into view with the same calm it carried into farmyards. It was larger than stories told, a mane heavy and clean, a bronze wave catching sun throwing it back. The eyes did not burn. They watched as a craftsman watches a tool. Heracles set his stance, notched an arrow. The bow bent. The string spoke. The shaft struck shoulder and bounced, as if from hammered bronze. A second arrow to the ribs. Same refusal. A third to the throat. The shaft shattered into drift. The lion blinked once. Stepped forward. Decision made. Distance meant nothing. Heracles dropped the bow. Tested the club against his palm. The olive wood had spring. The weight pleased him. But he understood before he swung bone, hide, and God-born toughness would not yield to blows alone. He drove the lion back into broken ground. Thorn and rock made a close ring. The beast changed rhythm, glided low, dust failing its path. It feinted right, then lunged straight in. The club met its skull with a sound like a door slammed against stone. The lion spun and struck with a forepaw that blurred in the air. The blow did not cut. It lifted Heracles from his feet, threw him into brush that tore at his arms as he rose. The animal did not press. It watched, as if measuring the man who had come to end it. The cave lay a short climb away. A pocket in limestone with two mouths set at angles. Anything cornered at one exit could slip from the other. This place had taught the beast patience. It could take a wound step into darkness and wait while men argued with fear at the entrance. Heracles studied the mouths as a hunter studies doors. He cut saplings, dragged stones, built a barricade at one opening tight enough that a man would need help to clear it. He left a narrow gap at the other. A body could pass only sideways. The work was slow. The sun shifted. Sweat salted his eyes. The valley grew still in the hour before dusk. Insects resting, birds holding their breath. He felt the animal watching, somewhere unseen. It came at last, no roar. It slipped through the gap like water hung for an instant between rock and light. Heracles stepped into it. The club was useless, the space too tight. He dropped the wood, reached for the mane with both hands. The hair felt like rope soaked in oil. The heat of the body a furnace bound in skin. The animal turned, struck for the throat. Heracles called the jaw on his forearm. Felt teeth that could shear bronze grind against muscle. He shifted his weight, drove a knee under the ribs, crushing for breath. The cave swallowed the sound of the struggle, returned it as a drumbeat. Dust rose, fell. Pebbles crawled in small avalanches. Heracles tightened his hold. With the patience of other battles that left no songs, strength did the work, and kept doing it minutes that stretched into a season. The forepaws clawed his back, burning furrows. The jaw slackened. The heat ran out of the great body like water from a cracked jar. He stayed with the weight until his own breath steadied, then let it down, stood over it in half-dark. There was the matter of the hide. The stories had carried the detail that mattered. No blade could open that skin. Men had tried before. Knives broke without lifting a single curl. Heracles tried his edge out of respect for the craft. The metal skated off. He considered fire. He considered stone. Then remembered the simplest truth. A thing made beyond the ordinary might answer only to itself. He knelt, took one of the lion's claws, worked it along the seam of the belly, where the skin hangs soft. The hide parted with a low sound like surrender when an impossible tool meets its proper use. He stripped the skin with the practice of a hunter since boyhood. Careful, avoiding cuts that would weaken the pelt. He set the hide on his shoulders, felt the weight settle a mantle that would never belong to another man. The jaw came forward over his brow. The fangs framed his face. Any who looked would first meet the memory of the beast itself. The smell of cave and blood wrapped him. It would take days to fade. He took up the club, stepped out into evening. The sky over in the mere had gone the color of crushed grapes. A few birds moved low, as if the weight that pressed them down had lifted. People came from behind walls in twos and threes. They measured the figure in the lion's mask. He moved with a tired steadiness, truth better spoken than shouted. No speeches on the road, only nods. The thanks of a country paid with bread, water, and a roof that did not leak. The return to Terence rewrote the air of the court. The herald met Heracles in the field outside the walls. He would not step closer than a safe distance. Eurystheus heard the news. He walked to the threshold. But when the figure in the lion's mask filled the courtyard, he stepped back. It is said he turned and hid in a grain jar, the way a boy hides from thunder. He gave the next command from that dark mouth. He ordered that future reports be delivered outside the walls. No trophies brought near. Heracles listened without reaction. He had work to do, and he knew fear born in a man's own house is an argument without an answer. The hills of Nemea did not return to innocence. Hunters found the cave, spoke as if it still held presence. Children dared each other to touch the stones of the blocked mouth, then ran laughing, sick with pride. Vines crept back where cattle had been dragged. The quiet of the land changed tone. It lost the tremor of fear. It gained the deeper breath that comes when danger has been removed by hands scarred in the doing. In art, the lion would never stand alone again. It lived as the cloak of one man, a second skin, a proof that some tasks remake the one who performs them as a river remakes its banks in flood. Leo claims the warm nights after the year tips past its height. The west goes copper at dusk. Crickets take the fields. Then a hook of stars lifts from the horizon, a bright question drawn by a careful hand. The old watchers called it the sickle. It marked the head and mane. Farther back, the body gathered in a long run of light. At the heart burned a single flame. Later ages called it Regulus. The Greeks named it Cardia Leonos, the heart of the lion. Priests waited on rooftops. They watched that star step clear of haze. They marked days to harvest. They set rites to steady the season, to ask forgiveness for the roughness of heat. Farmers read Leo as they read soil. Vine leaves grew stiff in noon glare. Fig trees bled white when cut. The land wanted measured work and early rest. When the sickle stood high after midnight presses were swept, jars set out in courtyards. The great must would soon run. Shepherds drove flocks higher where night winds still moved. In towns, the air tasted of dust and olives. Lions lay in marble at gates. Their stern eyes looked down on carts and sandaled feet. A carver's lesson placed paw on globe. Rule yourself. Hold the line. Let strength sit still until needed. Under those eyes, men came and went with baskets, news, and small griefs that never stopped the day's work. Astronomers fixed Leo among the zodiac with pride. It walked the ecliptic like an animal sure of its ground, a head cancer with its dim manger. Behind Virgo, with wheat in her hand, the placement taught rhythm. Pause at the hinge. Step into labor. Lay claim to bread. Star by star, the figure resolves. The head bends. Forepaws press unseen earth. The spine runs to a cold spark at the tail denebula. When the whole rises, the sky seems to carry weight. Even those who knew no names felt it. A presence, a standard raised without trumpet. Myth gave the outline history. Zeus set the lion in the sky to mark the end of terror, a cave that trained a beast to ignore iron, a struggle enclosed stone where a man refused to yield. The trophy in heaven is not a head on a wall. It is an image that teaches. The hide on a hero's shoulders silences crowds. The shape in the sky steadies centuries. When children asked why the lion looks ready to move, the answer came as fact. It took doors off hinges. A man learned its patience. drew it into ground where tricks failed, did the long work of breath against breath, then carried the lesson away, and gave it to the year. Temples answered with art. Painters showed Heracles in half-light, the lion's jaw fallen across his brow. Sculptors cut muscle that spoke without words. The pelt a mantle that ended boasts. Coins traveled hand to hand, a lion facing the wind, a wreath around a magistrate's name. Mosaics caught water and wine in tesserae lions. The creature watched from bathhouses, banquet halls, townhouse floors. A guest paused over the pattern while a servant poured. Strength is in the house. Spend it with care. The message passed without sermon. Sailors trusted Leo for their course. When Regulus cleared the rail before dawn, a helmsman confirmed his line for Rhodes or for the heel of Italy. When the sickle leaned west at night's end, men judged how much dark remained. When to call relief. The lion did not shout in storms. It stood, fixed where it should be. It gave mariners a point to hold when minds wandered, when fear grew teeth. In that steadiness, the brothers of the sea felt a promise of discipline. Keep the angle. Trust the star. Let the wave pass. Philosophers studied Leo as earned authority. They pointed to Regulus, spoke of the difference between a crown and a head strong enough to bear it. The lion's face looks outward. It does not plead. It does not threaten. It consents to be a measure. Kings brought gifts to shrines asking for dignity that does not tip into rage. Judges wore rings with lions carved in bezels. They tried to remember haste shames the bench. Even households listened. Fathers told sons, a heavy hand must learn when to open. Mothers told daughters, iron in the spirit does not require iron in the tongue. The constellation framed these sentences. A picture held the advice in place. Writers of catalogues kept the names so a distant future could still point to know. Hipparchus marked the slow slide of the sky. Still, he placed the lion carefully. Ptolemy added magnitudes, numbers on a map. Poets folded that dry precision into breath again. A lion crouches in the east. His heart burns clear. The year has passed its turning. Bring water, bring shade, bring breath for those who labor before noon. A city that learns such lines grows hard to break. Its people know when to rest. They know when to stand. They know what a long day demands from the back and from the will. The old festivals of late summer gave Leo a seat. Men set wreaths of dry bay on door lintels. Women cooled wine with riverstones wrapped in linen. Heralds called athletes into dusty arenas. Feet threw up light. In the stands, a father pointed to the sky. His child watched wrestlers lock and lift. See that curve of stars over the roofline? That is the main. The bright one is the heart. Watch how the stronger man waits. See how he chooses the moment and holds. The rules of the contest were a local echo of a larger story. Control the field. Close the exits. Do the work in a space you have made. As the season wore on, the lion crossed the meridian. It leaned west in the early night. The heat still lay heavy on streets and tiles. Cicadas pressed their song into stone. The figure remained high enough to watch roofs with its gaze when dinners ended, and courtyards cooled. Voices fell. Lamps guttered. A last cup went around the table. The stars kept their places as if human hours did not matter. People took comfort in that indifference. A constant above the variable. A frame around change. In that frame, Leo kept teaching by being present. A memory of a cave outside Nemea. A posture of readiness that does not steal forward. A heart that does not flicker. So the Greeks had the lion stand where they needed a law that could be seen. The law said, force must learn to be patient and then exact. The law said, a city must bar the easy door and steer danger into a place where courage can work in close. The law said, a man who has taken a beast by the throat does not have to raise his voice. He can put on the skin, walk home at dusk, while the hills hold their breath. Above him, the same outline goes on walking across months. Head lowered, paws firm. Eyes fixed on the ground, all must cross. Virgo enters the story on threshing floors. The first dust of grain hangs like smoke. Husks crackle under wooden sledges. Men walk in circles, singing to keep rhythm. Women bend at baskets lifting clean kernels with quick wrists. Children chase the chaff as it rides a small wind and falls in pale drifts along walls. For an hour, the village looks secure. Bread will come. Oil will come. The jar in the corner will not echo when struck with a knuckle. In that kind of hour, the Greeks placed a figure beside the workers. A young woman. She watched without drawing attention. A maiden with the cool steadiness of a well in August. They called her Astraea in one voice, Dike in another. Daughter of Themis, some said. Child of dawn and star, said others. Justice in the shape of a person hands clean, but knowing the price of order. She holds a single ear of wheat. She looks at the measure in a woman's scoop. She hears old men argue at a boundary stone and waits to speak until they fall quiet. The world she loved soured slowly. The stories gave its stages, because people understand steps better than collapse. Golden yoken doors, silver longer nights, bronze armor that answered anger too quickly, then the age Hesiod mourned. The one that did not bother with pretty names, iron, but change showed first at doorways. Guests turned away, told to find their own water. Tables with bite marks where hands fought for the last piece of cheese. In courts, the loud and the weary gave up. Oaths taken with casual voices. Fields cat in the dark one rode too far. A widow's goat went missing, came back slaughtered in another man's pot. The gods watched from their high rooms, withdrew one by one, like household gods packed into chests before a move. Astraea stayed. She stood in porch's hand on lintel, telling men to put the knife away. She stood by wells reminding children to wait their turn. She stood in markets where weights were ground thin, asking sellers to place one more fig on the plate. There were days when it worked. The knife went back in a belt. The child stepped aside without tears. The seller nodded and added the fig. Those days held her in place. She walked roads between towns, slept under vines, watched the same moon reapers watch from fields. Then came days when the knife rose anyway, when the child scooped water with both hands until the trough went wrong, when the seller laughed and kept the change. She knew the sound of life bending past repair. It is simple. A voice grows flat, a face sets in stone. People stop looking at the witness. They talk over her shoulder as if she were a pillar. She stayed until that sound lived everywhere, even in rooms where bread had been blessed 50 years, where everyone knew the names never spoken in anger. The stories say she was the last immortal who loved men to walk away. No rush, a steady leaving. A woman who knew how to make an exit that preserves dignity. Her walk became legend. She chose the dirt road under plane trees, past altars with thin smoke, did not pause to fold ash. She left pottery districts where clay dust lives forever in knuckles, crossed long bridges where the river gleamed like hammered bronze. She turned once in a barley field, watched gleaners pick corners in silence. She did not speak. She lifted the single ear of wheat, held it to her breast like a mother lifts an infant when the crowd grows rough. The Greeks understood. She would carry one proof of what was good. Take it where hands could not bruise it. Leave the rest to men and their hours. Birds lost their nerve, did not follow. Dogs lay in shade, watched her pass with heads on paws. Night gathered around her in a clean ring. The air changed weight. Torches seemed rude beside her. The road rose as if it had always been a ramp. She did not fly. She did not run. She stepped hill to hill like a farmer crossing irrigation channels with a brimming bucket. Below, farm lights spread like a net. At the edges of those lights, men argued again. The same harsh words. She did not turn back. The sky met her without ceremony. A place opened, held its shape. The maiden stood there, unwavering. The ear of wheat shone like a coal in a raked fire. The Greeks gave it a name that fit. Speaker, the ear, a single bright witness carried upward to swear that order had once lived on earth. Down below, law kept going. Because men need it even when they hate it. Magistrates kept notes. Memory is partisan. Contracts grew longer. Witness lists stretched a page and a half. Judges sent for extra benches. The habit of weighing returned in tools since the hand that once weighed by instinct was gone. People missed her most in moments with no rulebook. A fistfight in a lane where neither man remembered the insult. A widow choosing between shame and hunger. A small theft that would ruin a boy if punished and corrupt others if ignored. The sky carried her image over all of this. Like a roof tile that will not crack, those who looked up saw Speaker. A steady lamp, throats loosened. Some took it as permission to try again in the morning. Some took it as a warning to stop before words went too far. The same pin of light served both. Virgo's stars took places around that kernel. The figure does not stride. She does not threaten. She reclines along the ecliptic gift across her lap, leaning a little toward the planet's line. The posture is watchful. The Greeks painted her on papyrus, on wet plaster of dining rooms, where men argued about olives, taxes, and whether sons should go to sea. The picture kept them honest more often than it shamed them. It said, "The best guardian of a city is habit living in ordinary hands. Sweep the threshold. Keep the measure fair. Let the voice with less coin speak first. Put the knife away before you are tired." Small commandments. No temple needed. No priest required. A constellation could carry them across harvests, across wars. It asked only that someone point and say the names in order: maiden, ear of wheat, speaker, justice, watching from above because she could not keep her footing below. Virgo takes up place when fields are near to giving all they have. Threshing floors warm at dusk. Jars stand in rows along walls. A slow wind carries the scent of straw and figs. Above this work stretches her figure calm as judges, calm as seasoned farmers. The maiden does not stride. She reclines on the path of planets, keeps one bright token where every eye can see, a single ear of grain. The star that names it burns steady white. Speaker. Villagers learned its location as they learned paths to water. Women teaching daughters to weigh flour pointed to it. Keep the measure, keep the peace, keep the year. The constellation spoke two languages at once. One the language of fields. Demeter's gravity lived here in quiet form. The sheaf in the maiden's hand reminded all, bread comes first. A city stands only as long as grain reaches the oven. The month of vintage waited just beyond the lion. Virgo stood between with the air of one who knows when to pour and when to hold back. Even the secondary stars hinted at work and timing. Epsilon the genies carried a name that wandered many tongues. It settled on a meaning farmers felt in their bones. The great gatherer. That faint gold pin told vineyards when to watch as sugar crept into skins. The sky offered signals to those who looked up from press or trellis. Asking the oldest question a household ever asks, is it time? The second language was the law. Astrea and Dyke survived here not as stories, but as presence. A balance in the eye. A habit in the hand. When markets opened at first light, when weights came out of drawers and were set in pans that rocked on thin arms, the maiden was already above the western roofs. Still watching. Merchants eyed the beam. They took off a fig, or added one. And in that small correction, a city confessed. It remembered what the image demanded. When magistrates drew bonds on wax tablets and pressed witness names into a tight line, they did so under a sky where the ear of grain held steady. No threat came with that light. No trumpet. Just a quiet instruction, one that could outlast a dynasty. Keep the contract clean. Speak before anger fills the mouth. Leave enough in the sack for the woman down the street whose son is away with the fleet. Sailors learned Virgo by roots and angles, not by the smell of cut straw. Speaker rides low in spring evenings. Climbs to a royal height when nights are short. Crews tracked it from the Levant shores to the Aegean Islands and across to Sicily, where the horizon is a hard blue blade by day and a perfect circle by night. When that single star cleared the starboard rail at the middle watch, a helmsman could fix a course without speaking. The bow held true until dawn lit the sail. The star did more than guide. It trained the mind. To stare by one bright point is to accept that steadiness is a craft, that the hand on the tiller must trust a pattern the sea cannot change, that the shortest prayer at night is simply a name spoken once into the wind. The keepers of the sky wrote Virgo into ledgers with the pride of men who knew they were preserving more than numbers. Hipparchus compared generations of notes and found the heavens were not fixed. The equinox had shifted. Speaker helped teach that lesson. A detail for astronomers yet easy to fold into a larger truth. The world moves. The measure must move with it. If the point that marked a season slides, the wise man adjusts his calendar and his temper. He does not blame the field. He looks again, corrects his hand. Artists returned to Virgo for centuries and still found something new. On a dining room wall, a maiden beside two men bent over accounts. Her gaze falls on the smaller pile of coins. In the mosaic near a bath, the sheaf glows against deep blue stone, each grain marked with pale tesserae that catch water and shine. On coins in busy ports, only the star above a single ear. The message stripped to its essence, understood from Antioch to Ostia. Even when sculptors placed scales in her wrist or a palm branch in her hand, the wheat never left her fingers. Food and fairness. The pairing said more about a state's stability than any speech in a portico. Myths run parallel to practice, like a river beside a road. Some told of Aragon mourning her father Aquarius, the wine-bearer of Dionysus. She hanged herself beneath a tree when his killers would not hear the truth. Her dog found the body. The gods set both in the sky, the girl as Virgo, the dog as a small star near the foot of greater constellations. The story gave Virgo grief. A grief farmers already knew by another path. Wine can be gift and danger. A city can fail to hear a just claim. The sky remembers the hearing that was refused. The maiden's calm carries that memory season to season. Without raising her voice, temples and courts set Virgo's image where citizens saw her on ordinary days. The figure became part of the city's furniture in the best sense. Men passed under her lamp on their way to take a loan, to swear an oath, to settle a fence, to beg mercy for a son who had stolen olives not his own. Conversations changed under her gaze. Men chose simpler words. They set their hands flat on the table instead of folding them into fists. The same star above the roof joined these rooms together, street to street, district to district, until the whole city shared one sense. There is a right way to weigh out a measure, a right way to add a witness name, a right way to split a field when a brother dies without sons. There were nights when the air cleared back to the shape it takes only after wind rinses it. Virgo lay across the sky so plain that even the tired could trace her line. Speaker shone like a coal pulled from ash. Children counted her lesser stars. Old men named her bright neighbors one by one and felt their chests ease in the naming. The constellation did not promise rain. It did not prophesy the fate of a fleet. It offered something more useful. A calm standard. A reminder to value mundane rights, the ones that keep a household from drifting and a city from breaking. Sweep the doorway before business. Share water at the well. Keep weights true when no one is watching. When the maiden slid into the west at the end of her season, the year had already shifted. The vintage pressed forward. Roads filled with carts and skins. Nights lengthened an inch. No drama. Just the sense of a page turning in a well-read book. A book that still asks for careful attention. Virgo had done her work. She bore witness over food and over bonds. She steadied the city's temper, and left a single bright grain burning above the roofs as the next labor came on. Libra rises when heat begins to soften. At dusk, the air smells of presses and wet stone. Vintage runs in courtyards. Donkeys stand with patient ears as skins are lifted and tied. Markets swell with sacks of grain and grapes stacked in baskets. The sun crosses the line between light and dark so cleanly that men on rooftops speak of equal hours, marking the day with a scratch on plaster. The year steadies itself. That is when the scales take their place. No creature stands there. No weapon gleams. Only two pans hanging from a beam. A small device, given the honor of a sign. The sky speaks plain. Measure this season. Balance the account. Give day and night equal respect. The Greeks first knew this part of the sky as Scorpion's claws. The old names remember it still. Zuban el-Yanubitha, southern one. Zuban esh-Shamalithah, northern. The hint was there. The Scorpion once held the whole span. Later, the Romans claimed it. They gave it a Latin name that matched their habits, Libra, the scales. It suited them, a people who loved calendars, laws written in straight lines, and coins stamped with weight. The constellation became an emblem of balance long before poets made it a metaphor. Scales hung in market stalls. Scales painted in tribunals. Scales carved in goddesses' stone hands. When citizens saw the twin lights lift at evening, they saw their tour of order reflected from a colder, safer height. The idea was older still. In Babylon, Scrooge pressed clay with a weighing sign. A balance drawn beside the Euphrates. The stars above held the same figure. The sun turned the year to autumn at that place. Temple officials checked measures against bronze standards, while the stars whispered the same rule: keep the pans even. Do not cheat the hungry. The world carried that lesson west. Merchants, captives, envoys. The scales joined the zodiac, month by month watching the sun move. Astronomers catalogued Libra with care. Alpha the southern pan, a loose double to the eye. Beta higher, some swore it glowed faint green. The figure is sparse. It never crowds the sky like the lion or archer. It rewards patience. That too is part of its meaning. In Rome's time, the sun crossed Libra at the equinox. Day and night equal. Precession has shifted that point away. Hipparchus measured it centuries ago. Still, the habit remains. Autumn is the season of the scales. People keep names when names keep work alive. Civic life pulled Libra down into halls and coins. Iquitas held scales on Roman money, beside a cornucopia. Justice stood in courts, scales in hand, calm enough to wait while tempers burned out. Guilds painted the emblem over doors, alongside the year and two officers' names. Farmers carved it into wooden measures so borrowings would return cleanly. Children learned balance as a game, a small weight in one pan, grain in the other, until the beam sat level. In that game, a city taught itself how to keep faith. The sky reinforced the lesson without voice. Libra rose, crossed the meridian, fell west, markets closed under its gaze, reopened next day with fresh chalk marks. Pilots sailing between islands watched it too, less for direction, more for timing. Yet those points spoke when to make a run, and when to refuse a captain who pressed for one too late. The Artesian winds of high summer eased. Breakers changed their note on stony coves. Libra's posture at dusk told crews what the fishes already felt in their bones. A last run was safe this week. Another would be foolish. So the constellation governed by restraint, by practical wisdom. Men who listened kept ships and lives. Men who ignored the signal came home under patched sail, or never came home at all. Writers who loved order looked to Libra for steady images, a beam that stands straight if you take care, two trays that punish greed without words, a line across the middle that refuses to tilt for shouting pleas. In the art of law-giving, this image proves stronger than speeches. Themis and Dike appeared with scales because the device spoke their names in strokes a child could copy. When the city renewed its promises after harvest, a herald carried a bronze balance in procession. He set it on temple steps. People laid coins on one side, loaves on the other, until the beam steadied. The act made an easy sermon: give until the arm stops trembling. Then go back to work. The stars carried memory of the Scorpion, even while the sign announced something new. Zubeno Janabai, Zuban Eshemali, Southern Claw, Northern Claw. The night kept both histories at once. That is how cultures grow. One people inherits a figure as part of a beast. Another redraws the lines, but keeps old names of the corners labels for a past that still breathes. The Greeks placed the scales between the maiden who withdrew and the scorpion that brings down the proud hunter. The sequence whispered, first keep the measure, then remember the sting that waits for arrogance. When the sun stepped into Libra, Cities marked the date with small, useful acts. Weights tested against standards. Official measures rinsed, blessed with salt. Debts counted and rolled forward, where mercy allowed. Courts cleared cases before winter closed the roads. Scribes sharpened reeds and began new ledgers. The scales looked on while people chose balance over heat, practice over noise. It produced no songs. It produced a year that held together. When winter's bull stirred on distant hills, the image still hung above the roofs. Two quiet pans, holding still in the wind, an instrument promoted to the sky so no one could say they had forgotten what fairness looks like. When Libra stood high at evening, streets of a Mediterranean town took on a certain pace. The press of grapes slowed. That settled under linen covers. Stewards tallied skins and weights with styluses that squeaked on wax. In that pause, the scales seemed to hang over every threshold. A shopkeeper reached for his bean balance. Brass pans set so they did not touch the counter. A boy laid out the standard stones, each stamped by the magistrate's office. The first customer pointed. Figs, barley. The arm dipped, rose, settled level. No one spoke. The bean became a small theatre of trust. The act repeated from stall to stall, lane to lane. Above those lanes, two stars kept slow watch, a reminder that fairness begins with simple motions performed in public. Libra carries little ornament. Two bright points, a few lesser lights, a spare geometry that fits its duty. Mariners who knew every boast of Orion, every jewel of the twins, spoke of Libra as a quiet tool. When the northern star of the pair cleared haze at dusk, pilots judged their window for coastwise runs. When the southern light slid down the rail by dawn, they marked a wind shift and made choices that saved timber and men. The scales gave no direction across open sea. They urged timing. Those who understood timing prospered. Those who ignored it learned patience from broken spars and torn canvas. On carved stones, on bronze coins, the balance passed through millions of hands. Iquitas stood on Roman denarii with scales and a horn of plenty, a message that law and provision walk together when a state is well governed. In forums, a traveler could test a merchant's measure on a public balance without fear of insult. Greek cities kept their metra in colonnades, marked with priestly names, so responsibility was clear. Above many benches, Themis or Dig presided in relief, hands resting on scales, calm enough to steady tempers. The scene taught more than speeches. Bring your measure into the light. Let the arm decide. Accept the result. Go home with your grain and your temper intact. Astronomers loved Libra's dependability. They marked its stars at the equinox of their age, wrote the position with pride, later wrote the difference with equal pride. Hipparchus compared old numbers to his own, saw the frame of the sky slip over years. Precession became a lesson, carried in the same pages as star catalogues. The scale still stood for balance in custom, in poetry. But observers learned two truths. The picture holds. The background moves. A patient mind can reconcile both without losing its footing. Artists gave Libra meanings citizens recognized at a glance. On friezes a magistrate lowering one tray, raising the other. On painted panels in autumn festivals, a bronze balance on temple steps, while the crowd piled bread and coins until the beam steadied an air that smelled of must and laurel. In houses, the emblem carved above doorways where accounts were kept. A father lifted his child to touch the beam. The lesson entered the body before the mind. The gesture became habit. Habit became custom. Custom survived bad years and ambitious men. The older memory of claws never vanished. Names preserved it. Zuban el-Janabi, Zuban Eshamali. Scorpion's reach echoing even as Libra stood as scales. Cultures understood. Walls are built from older stones. A figure cut free still carries its past work as an echo in the tongue. Storytellers could point at autumn's arc and say both lineages in one breath. First the creature that seizes, then the device that weighs. A progression as clear as a page turning. Courts favored Libra when tempers ran high. On days crowded with dowries, fields, water rights, and usher set a balance on the magistrate's table. Raised the beam so it caught light. Stepped back. Litigants watched empty pans settle. For a moment, the room had a center that belonged to neither party. Witnesses stood straighter. Scribes sharpened reeds. The judge began. Hours later, the same being still stood. Silent. Unmoved. Few remembered it on leaving, yet its presence shaped posture, shaped words. That is how order often takes hold. When vineyards finished, Libra remained marker of the labors that follow. Debts counted and reset. Weights rinsed and sealed for winter. Inventories of oil and grain copied fresh. Guilds audited their chests master and apprentice, each placing a stone, the beam returning to center under 4 eyes. Such rituals anchor memory, translate sky into action, knit households to institutions, institutions to seasons. Scales overhead validated scales on the table. 2 sets answering each other like call and reply across a courtyard. Philosophers found a language in Libra, but needed no stretched metaphors. A beam holds true when its fulcrum sits square, its arms balanced. A polity holds true when its laws are legible, its judgments predictable. The best treatises hid in that simple relation. Teachers showed it with wooden pans. A lamp casting the shadow of the beam on a wall. The lesson entered hands first, minds followed. As autumn slipped toward early winter, the constellation crossed the meridian at dusk and began its descent toward the western line. Roof tiles cooled. Smoke from presses thinned. The long shouting of summer quieted into conversations at a walking pace. The scales did not cease their work when they sank. Their season's habits continued in ledgers, in storehouses, in the measured steps of men who had learned to keep the beam level even when tired. In that continuity, you feel why the ancients gave an instrument a place beside beasts and heroes. The year depends on fearless strength in some chapters. In others, it depends on steadiness, performed without witnesses. Libra taught the second kind, made sure the lesson stayed visible every time the sun came to the border between light and dark. Scorpio rises from the horizon like something remembered before language. A hook tail climbs first. Then the curve of a body thick with stars. Low in the southern sky, the heart burns red. A steady coal. Sailors learned it at once. Farmers pointed it out to their sons. Antares, rival of Aries. The name tells you what it looks like when the air is clear and the night warm enough to carry voices across fields. The scorpion takes shape in stages as your eyes adjust. A brow forms around day Shuba. Claws stretch west toward the year already tipped. The tail bends tight ending in a sting named Shola, a word that tastes of sand and heat. One of the few figures that needs no help from imagination. The desert peoples knew it. The island peoples knew it. The Greeks gave it a story to match its weight. Orion drew that story to himself. The stubborn gravity of men who never measure their words. A giant. A hunter. Crossing seas in a single stride of rumor. He boasted he would clear the world of every beast. Some say he laid hands on what should never be touched. Turned desire into assault. The island of Chios remembers him for a king's errand soured when the bride was delayed. Artemis appears in other tellings. Sometimes companion. Sometimes judge. In one strand, the earth herself Gaia heard the claim. Answered without speech. She sent a scorpion from the ground. A creature that carries its weapon behind, never announcing the angle until the last step. The meeting reads like a carving in stone. Orion strides across flat country at noon. Heat lifts and sheets. The scorpion comes from shadow cast by nothing more than a rock, small beside him until it is close. Then the weapon matters more than the measure of the bodies. A quick arc, a puncture, like an accident, but fire under the skin. The giant turns, stamps, fails to find the thing that has already done enough. The poison works slow. In other verses, the creature drives him into water. He wades in until the surface closes overhead. A Paris trick enters in others. A brother sets a test for his sister. A speck in the sea. A bowstring. An arrow true. Orion sinks. However the line is written, the end keeps faith. A man who claimed the right to end all wild lives becomes the warning against claims without measure. The gods set their witnesses where no hand could move them again. Orion among winter stars, a belt of 3 lights, a sword beneath, dogs at his heels, a club raised into darkness that needs no club. Far across the river of the sky, the Scorpion holds the months he cannot take. One rises, the other flees. The old teachers pointed to that chase as if it could cool a fever. Watch at dusk in late summer. The Scorpion lifts. Orion is gone. Watch again before dawn in winter. Orion stands bright. The Scorpion has sunk. The geometry of warning. Pride draws its answer from the ground. The answer waits patient and strikes when the hour returns. Antares holds the center. Its color feels ancient, even when you are young. Around it, the Scorpion wears clusters like sparks from a forge. The Ptolemy cluster M7 spills pale dust south of the tail. N6, the butterfly, opens like a hand. The names came later. The sight is older than names. On clear nights, a shepherd far from lamps could read weather in those smudges and feel less alone. Pilots knew the line from heart to sting. They judged bearings when coasts went dark. The figure guides the body. Constellation or craft, a curve here, a halt there. The road from Antares to Shola teaches memory by motion. Enough to get you home across water you've crossed 100 times and still respect. Ancient mouths kept both quarrels. Gaia sending the Scorpion because man threatened the order of living things. Artemis calling up a creature to end what she would not forget. Apollo's arrow circling like a gull. The point is not which god carried the message, but that the ground answered. A low instrument, a quiet instrument, one that does not need sound. Rural altars bore Scorpions in relief. A backcountry house understands the danger of hands that forget themselves. A mother taught a child the shape in the sky. 2 sentences to last a lifetime. Do not boast against the world. Do not mistake speed for safety. Scorpio owns the deep summer nights when sleep grows light. Dogs bark at nothing, and the countryside waits for a wind that will not come. In those hours, the red heart hangs over roofs, and towns fall into listening. Poets cared for measure. Magistrates cared for order. Both liked Scorpio because it explains without ornaments. A body, a weapon, a jaw, where the smaller thing never wanders from its task. Men careless with strength stood in courtyards tracing the tail in the sky, voices falling. Boys counting stars stopped at the stinger, counted again to be sure. The constellation did its work by being itself. The calendar folded its lesson into action. When Scorpio rode high, harvest plans hardened into dates. Heat pushed cities toward evening courts. Roads emptied at noon, filled again at dusk. Vine leaves curled in glare, lifted again at dark. The sign offered no omen for single lives. It spoke to the whole. Keep to shade in the worst hours. Cut earlier than pride would like. Tie bundles with care. The air drinks sweat faster than water replaces it. The same voice spoke to soldiers on borders, crews in anchorages. Shorten the morning watch. Think twice before chasing quarrels into open country. Put the weight on prudence until the weather changes. So the Greeks let the Scorpion hold its ground opposite the hunter. The image traveled vase, wall, coin, sky. It never lost its edge. A creature drawn with economy. A sting that bends like a question you cannot refuse to answer. A red heart at the center, reminding the strong the world holds forces that do not care who wears the crown or carries the club. The sign sits on the ecliptic, the sun's yearly road. The sun stays only briefly among these stars. Ancient calendars gave Scorpio a handful of days before the sun crossed into Ophiuchus, the serpent-bearer. The short stay did not weaken the figure's presence. It heightened the sense of a gate to be marked with care. The Milky Way flows through the same region, giving the Scorpion's body tangible depth on clear nights far from lamps. A child who sees that arc once from a black beach carries it forever, finds it again from mountain ridges or decks wet with dew. Scholars love Scorpio for its old tongues. The Greeks wrote Scorpios in their lists. The Romans wrote Scorpius, drew the body in mosaics, with tesserae the color of wine and honey. Traders carried Arabic names for tail and brown names that lived on through shifting alphabets. A fitting habit of inheritance. A creature that endures in dry ground and heat leaves the same impression on traveling minds. Greek and Roman artists carved scorpions on stone seals, amulets. Soldiers wore them on iron rings. Householders set them on lamps so the last light before sleep was a warning against careless hands and rash vows. Astrology in Hellenistic schools placed Mars with the scorpion. They taught its power through fixed intensity. Philosophers, caring more for conduct than fate, borrowed the image without the rules. They spoke of Scorpio as discipline that waits and spends its force in a single clean use. The same lesson lived in custom. Reapers under Antares bound sheaves tighter because the air drank sweat faster than whales could satisfy thirst. Captains shifted watches so midday found fewer men on deck and those with water near. Border commanders shortened patrols, doubled the hour at the gate, a concession to heat that preserved horses and tempers. Antares has the authority of a clock hand. Its heliacal rising, when the star returned at dawn after invisibility, told communities the worst heat was coming. Wine presses checked, roofs patched, jars counted and chalked because miscounting after harvest costs less than miscounting before. That red pin of fire taught sailors prudence in late-season crossings. A voyage safe in the weeks of the twins could sink a hull in the weeks of the scorpion. Good practice lives in such distinctions, and the sky repeats the lesson until it becomes second nature. Artists never tired of fitting the scorpion into useful places. It crawls around the rims of craters cups that once held watered wine. It decorates the base of sundials, where a small gnomon throws a thin blade of shadow across the hours. It crouches on thresholds in mosaic, a sign that tells visitors watch your tongue, and tells residents keep your own. The bunny carries no crown. The figure requires no spear. A curved weapon raised behind a patient creature, enough narrative for a household. It says, slow your stride as you enter. Measure your strength as you speak. The same sense follows the constellation across the year. The red heart climbs. The tail bends. The lesson arrives without need of a priest. So the Greeks kept Scorpio in its place, across from the winter hunter, and let Antares burn above their courts, their fields, their harbors, until the season changed. When the first hints of cool entered the air, and the cicadas eased their chorus, the stinger drew down toward the line of the sea. Vines let go their last sweetness, roads filled with carts, and the sky moved on to the sign that draws a bow. The scorpion left behind an afterimage in the eyes of anyone who had watched it night after night. A curve, a call, a rule about claims and their limits written where no hand could erase it. Sagittarius comes up along the low southern line when heat has settled into stones and the Milky Way spills across the sky like a pale road. The eye finds a bow first, then an arm that draws the string. Then, a body half man, half swift creature, planted in darkness, poised as if it already knows where the arrow will land before release. The arrow points toward the red lamp in the scorpion's breast. The whole scene a single sentence written in light. An archer stands on the bank of the Star River and holds a threat at bay. Storytellers gave the archer a name, a home among living hills. They spoke of Crotus, a hunter raised on Mount Helicon, under the care of Eume, nurse of the Muses. He learned woodcraft with the quickness of the boy who never feared weather. He kept the slopes quiet while the daughters of memory sang. He judged the stir in brush before he saw it. He invented a way to mark delight that rooms still take for granted, hands brought together sharply so the air answers back. The Muses called it praise. Crotus called it thanks. When he ran with hounds, his arrows struck where thought had told them to go. When he sat at the spring below the mountain, listening to hymns, his eyes stayed on the tree line counting heartbeats until he could stand, knock, draw, and change the mind of anything that came too close. The Muses asked Zeus to honor their guardian one who understood some and danger in the same breath. The god answered. He fixed Crotus in the sky, with a bow forever drawn. Hooves, or shaggy legs, artists added to show speed. Other mouths told of Chiron, the patient teacher of heroes. His virtues bled into the archer's outline even though his own constellation lies farther south. They remembered a wound that never closed. A poisoned arrow from Heracles lodging a lesson deeper than words. And the strange bargain that followed when the immortal chose to yield his endless days so Prometheus could be freed. Wisdom, skill, justice, learned in pain too large to keep contained in one figure only. So observers allowed the zodiac's archer to carry that character too. An arrow drawn against the dark as a sign of knowledge that acts without noise. The Greeks read the archer's posture against the creature behind him and found comfort in the geometry. The line from knock through shaft passes toward Antares. A reminder courage lives in the silent moment before release. Ancient star writers traced the bow with names that sailed into later ages. Caus Borealis, the upper limb. Caus Media, across the bend. Caus Australis, the lower stave. The arrowhead glints at Al Nasl. The hand finds its grip by Nunki, a bright mark whose sound traveled through traders' tongues. A small star Ocellus sits at the arm like a shoulder flash. Priest astronomers copied these points into lists, compared lists to the sky, until the pattern held steady in memory. Pilots in warm harbors needed the body less than the bow. The arc itself became instruction, a curve you could set against the sea to keep bearings while running summer coasts. The archer stands where the star river is thickest. On clear nights, a shepherd lying on worn ground sees darkness gouged with brightness. Patches like breath on glass set among countless sparks. Those who watched long said the sky looked deepest there. They kept reverence for the place. The ecliptic runs through the same region. Planets step past the archer's arm in slow procession like travelers asking leave to cross a guarded bridge. Calendars noted his season with tasks that suit long days and short tempers. Move stores before thunder breaks. Check rigging before a launch. Set water where workers can reach it without asking. The myth gave the practical a face, a figure on the Star River's margin promising defense while others do their work. Artists put the archer into every material people touched. He runs on black figure vases, his bow a crescent in flight. He's cut into intaglios no wider than a thumb miniatures carried in rings. He strides across mosaics in bathhouses, tiles shaping muscle and taut string in lines a child could follow with a damp finger. In all these rooms, the same lesson waits. Preparation lives in small motions. A hand cops the knock. A second hand draws. AIs find the mark refuse to wander. The arrow does not tremble because the arm has practiced too often to let it shake. When the archer clears eastern roofs after sunset, the high summer night has reached the stretch when crickets keep chorus and towns grow still. Men lean on parapets, counting stars without speaking. Women on balconies pause over linens, look south. A boy on a flat roof learns patience by matching stars along the shaft while the scorpion sinks. The figure teaches without voice. It invites the quiet that turns skill into instinct. The Greek slovers of story and of order left the archer to keep that invitation open, for any eyes willing to wait until the bow comes full into view and the arrow finally points with certainty into the dark. Sagittarius governs the weeks when the Milky Way hangs like low smoke. The air stays warm after dusk. The grass releases the day's heat slowly, as if the ground itself were breathing. People look south and find the bow again. The shape grows obvious as the eye adjusts. Caus Borealis holds the upper limb. Caus Media bends the middle. Caus Australis secures the lower stave. Al Nasl glints like the arrowhead. Nunki steadies the hand. Ocellus marks the arm like a badge. Farther off Rukbat at the knee, a core star scribes love to note, even while brighter fires drew more eyes. On practical nights, a pilot traced a smaller figure inside the larger. A pot with spout and handle picked from these same stars. Later ages called it the teapot. The Milky Way rises from its spout like steam. Children saw it at once and remembered it for the rest of their lives. Calendars placed tasks under this sign that required long patience, a clear head. The dog days had passed their peak. Thunder still threatened at sunset. Roads held dust that tasted of lime and crushed grass. Storehouses needed checking before carts began to roar. Ropes mended, coiled close to hand. Water set out where men could reach for it without breaking pace. The bowing a south becomes a rule for the mind. Prepare before movement starts. Hold the draw without shaking. Choose the instant that changes outcomes. The myth gives this rule a guardian, one who understands music and risk in the same breath. Crotus kept Helicon quiet so psalms could be heard. He listened while watching the tree line. He invented a clean way to praise, hands struck together, so the air replied. The Muses asked Zeus to keep such a listener forever. The answer stands each summer along the Star River. The string drawn, the arrow held. Scholars who loved neat attributions pointed to Crotus. Others felt Chiron's gravity and let it shape the figure's character even while keeping his own constellation apart. Chiron taught heroes to ride, to hunt, to mend wounds, to draw a bow without haste. He carried a hurt he could not mend and traded immortality to end it. Wisdom that accepts cost belongs anywhere. Courage is expected to last. The archer over southern roofs acquires that weight. Artists understood this. They gave the body that holds the bow a human chest and a beast's engine, hooves in some hands, a long goat tail in others, a hybrid made to move and to aim at once. Sailors used Sagittarius for bearings as the season pulled them along coasts. The arrow points toward the red lamp in the scorpion's breast, a straight line that keeps a helm honest on warm nights. Ports under islands glowed like small fires. Crews watched the bow clear the yard and counted how much dark remained for rowing. The Star River behind the archer gave confidence. On cloudless passages where the brightness thickens, the eye learns to trust a route across the sky, the way a hunter learns a path across scrub. Pilots past their prime taught the young to read the bow piece by piece. Point out Caus Australis, find our Nassau, walk your finger along the shaft Anunki. Keep that line in your head when land sinks after moonset. Priest astronomers wrote the figure with pleasure. They loved how the ecliptic climbs through this quarter, while the Milky Way pours through it at a separate angle. Planets pass the stretched bow like petitioners crossing a guarded bridge. Mars looks fierce here. Jupiter glows with an authority that belongs to his size and to the stories that carry his name. Venus steals attention when she strays into the same field. Watchers copy positions with reed and ink until the paper became a dark garden of points and numbers. Hipparchus compared earlier gardens to the sky overhead and saw the frame itself shifts with centuries. He kept both truths without flinching. The pattern remains useful. The background moves. In towns that cared for memory, the archer marched through images people touched every day. He strides across the black curve of craters, bow drawn tight, the string picked out in pale stroke. He lives on signet stones no larger than a thumb, a miniature pressed into wax to seal accounts and letters. He runs over bathhouse floors and tesserae that shine after water passes limbs made alive by wet tiles. Carvers set him on public altars beside the summer months. Painters placed him on dining room walls opposite shelves of cups, a reminder that chaos still walks and someone must keep watch at the feast's edge. The season under this sign trains temper as much as muscle. Heat pares speech down to what is necessary. Work gets done because men pace themselves. The bow teaches the same economy. Lift, anchor, draw through the back. Let shoulders carry the weight so the hand can remain calm. Do it again after water. The sky above stubble fields makes these motions feel older than any body. A boy pulls a short bow at dusk behind a sheepfold. Crickets fill the silence as he tries to keep his elbow high. A veteran on a rooftop, long retired from weapons, feels his shoulders remember the line of a good shot. Neither speaks. The figure holds them both. The arrowhead brightens. The scorpion's tail sinks. Late at night, the archer stands above the thickest star clouds visible without instrument. The darkness between those clouds reaches a depth that unsettles steady hearts. Philosophers let their voices trail there. The world beyond the world shown in a form that demands humility. The bow aimed into that region gives mortals something to do with their attention. You can count stars along the shaft and feel small without feeling lost. You can place the arrowhead and trust it will be there next year. A pattern with names steadies the mind when summer runs long and fatigue blurs edges. When the archer begins sliding west, a city has already changed its rhythm. Presses run by torchlight. Teams load carts before sunrise. Householders check shutters against sudden winds. In ports, ropes thicken over bollards, as if harbors gathered their own muscles for weather to come. Sagittarius remains above the southern roofline while these motions repeat. The sign carries no crown. It offers a craft. Across fields, across water, across lamplit rooms, the lesson is the same. Preparation and quiet. Attention held. Release when the mark is sure. Capricorn rises when the year thins, and fields give off the dry smell of stalks left standing for birds. Evening brings clear cold that sharpens sound. Roof tiles click as they settle. From the south, a wedge of faint stars climbs in broken triangle. Fore part squared like a jaw, hind part falling away toward water. Sailors learn the outline by habit. Farmers lend it by season. Temple calendars fixed great days to its ascent. The sun reached its lowest noon here for generations of Greek and Roman time, a turning so steady that geographers named a whole band of Earth after it. The Tropic of Capricorn runs across maps like a scar, a reminder that solstice once stood there, and that men keep a name even when heavens shift by slow degrees. The goat that enters the river kept watch over this pause in light and over winter's work. Count the jars again, seal the lids, mend the nets, write the tally with care before the new year empties them with fresh need. The story circles to a day when heaven's order failed. Typhon rose from the earth, a mountain torn loose and given legs. The monster carried a forest of snakes for hair and a voice that broke stone. When he climbed the skyline, gods who had ruled by effortless gesture felt their hands go light. Olympus emptied immortals fleeing, scattering their tracks. They changed their forms as they ran. A swan beating wings ever reeds. An ibis lifting its long bill from the mud. A cow kicking down a riverbank. Pan, whose hooves once ran laughter from Arcadia, reached the water's edge, the monster's breath at his back. He plunged forward, and in the plunge, his body learned a new shape, answering the need of the hour. From the waist up, he kept goat strength, horned head, shaggy neck, chest built for a shout. From the waist down, he learned the river's craft. A scaled tail, a swimmer's engine, a line through the current that left no wake. In a single movement, he became the creature the sky would remember forever. A goat sewn to a fish, a guardian fit for banks and eddies where danger hunts. While the gods hid, Zeus fought and lost ground. Typhon striking on a ridge, tore the sinews from his hands and legs, a violence that made the king of the sky as weak as a child dropped from a cart. The monster hid those tendons in a cave on Cilician shores and set a guard with a head full of serpents. Here the story turns of a small figure who refused to be counted out of the main work. Pan moved through reeds and shore with thief's quiet. He found the cavern by the smell of salt and snakes. Hermes, who knew every trick and every door that opens to a soft enough password, joined him. Between them, they brought the guarded packet into daylight quick as a kingfisher's strike. Zeus fitted the sinews back into wrist and heel. He rose with a voice that sent Typhon fleeing toward Etna. Lightning finished what cunning began. In the peace that followed, Zeus set the goatfish among the stars to honor a courage made by water sense and by a body that had learned without complaint to wear two elements at once. Older memories cling to the same outline. On Babylonian tablets, the figure is Suhermashut, the goatfish, pressed into clay in the age when scribes wrote the year as a braid of seasons and the sky as a round tablet with wedges for signs. Traders carried that beast west with their weights and their god names. The Greeks gave the old image fresh work at crisis they could recite a behalf. The Romans kept the sea-goat at winter's hinge. They peopled the month with rites to Saturn, god of sowing and stored grain, green boughs in the forum, and open hands at the tables of the poor. In houses hung with ivy, children learned to point out the low wedge of Capricorn, and say the word that binds story to season. Turning men of figures recorded the solstice against the same group even after Hipparchus proved that equinoxes and solstices creep along the ecliptic through centuries. Names held because names carry habits. Habits held because they keep granaries from lying and ships from leaving on foolish winds. The sea-goat stars have a grammar the trained eye enjoys. At the tail shines Deneb al-Geditha goat's tail, a steady white that marks the hind edge where the imagined body sinks into dark. Near the head stands Al-Jidi, a double to the naked eye on very clear nights. 2 points grazing close, like horns side by side. Along the upper line glows Dabi the butcher, a name that wanders through tongues and suits a season when households cull herds for winter meat. Nishira hangs on the back with quiet light. Later lists call it the bringer of good news, a sound borrowed from traders' speech, pleasing even when scholars shook their heads at its path. The figure is faint. It rewards patience. Children learn it by first finding the bright water bird to the west and the winged square above. Then they slip down to the goat, whose hindquarters are already in the river. Once seen, it becomes a companion of long nights, a modest sign marking hours without demanding a crowd. Another thread binds the goat to care given in secret. When Zeus was a hidden infant on Crete, a goat called Amalthea fed him with her milk, while the Curetes beat their shields to drown his cries. One day, he snapped her horn in play. The gods placed a charm on the broken thing and made it the cornucopia, a horn that pours grain, apples, and wine without end. Greek images place that horn in many hands titch in cities, Demeter in fields. Yet the memory of the goat remains in the constellation that rules stores at year's end. The line from the cave on Ida to the wedge of winter sky is short once you see it. Care breeds abundance. Abundance needs guarding. A creature that can graze cliffs in summer and swim floods in autumn is a fitting emblem for that duty. Capricorn's place on the sun's road gave it power beyond one tail. When the sun entered the goat, households took stock. They crowned a few days with license and gifts during Saturn's feast. Then plain work resumed. Oils counted. Ledges closed and opened. Nets laid in the wind to dry. Not stiff with salt. Shepherds checked stone walls for gaps before lambing. In harbors, skippers looked south, where the sea-goat kept his steady station. They measured two things at once, the time of year and the mind they would need to cross it. The sign speaks in the tone trusted when years run lean. Endure, prepare. Change shape when the river leaves its banks. Hold to the rock when it falls again within its bed. So the Greeks let the sea-goat keep the low corner of the sky where water meets earth, and the year decides to turn. The figure carries no spear. It carries a lesson about survival. A goat that learned to swim brought sinews back to the hand that throws thunder. The image preserves that fact without embroidery. On rooftops stamped with frost, or in courtyards washed after storms, eyes find the faint triangle, and the tail star and remember rescue can come from quick mind, and from a body willing to learn a second element. When the first fails, Capricorn rules the hours when breath shows in doorways, and first frost bites at the edge of systems. The sign rises in clean skies that sharpen sound. A cart axle echoes down a lane. A dog shakes, and the collar rings like metal. This is the portion of the year men mark with instruments as well as stories. A priest stands beside a gnomon at noon. The shadow stretches longest across the paving. Chalk fixes the reach. Tomorrow the mark is shorter by a finger. The turn has begun. Calendars and temples take a fresh column. Account boards take a new tally. Men check jars in cool rooms count again. Oil, grain, salted meat, wine to last a month. The sun sits low at noon. The day releases light carefully. The night gathers it with open hands. Near the goat is a cluster like breath on glass. In dark air, it looks like a blurred star. It is a ball of suns bound like bees on a branch. Later books call it Messiah 30. Shepherds knew it by feel before by name. When the night is sharp and dry, the cluster shows a bright core. When haze lies low, it dissolves. The difference tells more about weather than any boast. Capricorn stars please readers who love doubles. The foremost horn is 2 stars in wide pair. The butcher star has companions as well. The tail light is steady most nights then, without warning, fades by a step when a dark body crosses it. A quiet eclipse, a cycle too long for most men to count. These are details for those who sit long with cold. They are also grammar, steadying the mind in bare months, when patience works harder than strength. City life folded the same steadiness into custom. Romans kept a week of festal ease as the sun reached its low point. Saturnalia doors opened. Masters traded seats with servants. Dice rattled in public. Cooks carried platters of loaves and pork. Children shouted one greeting to strangers and were answered with gifts. Eo Saturnalia. Laurel hung over lentils with colored wool. Lamps burned longer than wisdom approved. And still the stores did not empty. Thought had filled them months before. When the week ended, cities swept floors and cleaned altars. Weights came back from cupboards. Scales returned to counters. Measures tested knew the form bench. The year does not repair itself by magic. It repairs because habits survive pleasure. Capricorn holds the corner while this happens. The goat has taken the river. The tail keeps the current. The quarters hold the bank. Power borrows its signs from the sky. Augustus chose the goat as badge on coins and standards. His astrologers found the creature rising at his hour of making. The emblem went abroad in silver and bronze. A small sea-goat swam over soldiers' heads, through markets where hands changed grain for oil. The message was simple: a ruler who knows when years turn. A ruler who crosses 2 elements. A ruler who watches stores and keeps rivers from taking the field. The image reached where speeches could not. It taught in pockets, on the palms of the poor. Centuries pass. The coins outlast the men. The goat still looks up from graves of dirt, saying the same sentence in a voice of metal. The star figure stands low and faint. Sailors value such modest signs. They signal time more than direction. When the goat clears the sea line in the first evening hour, wise skippers shorten plans. Long crossings sleep until spring. Crews throw lashings over cargo. Check oar thongs twice before dark. The Artesian winds are gone. Now come blows from quarters and calm days that trap hulls among swells. Pilots learn creeping routes along shore, adding harbors to maps of weeks. In that craft, the sea-goat becomes a friendship's keep. A small wedge over the rail. A message, wait, or move in short steps. A lamp at the edge of caution. Inland, the same message. Shepherds bring ewes to shelter. Mend walls against foxes. Vintners drain dregs from jars. Leave them inverted till the sour smell is gone. Potters clean rims with wet cloth. Scribes close ledgers, begin new with careful strokes. Here the old story of broken horns holds its place. Amalthea raised a hidden child. Her lost horn became a horn that pours. People keep that shape near cupboards, a promise that thought and care bring another year to the table. The goat in the sky and the horn on the shelf speak the same language from different heights. Capricorn stands between the water-bearer and the fishes. Winter runs beneath these 3 signs like a river through cut stone. The goat enters first, knowing bank and current. The bearer follows carrying water across land and sky. The fishes swim last bound together by cord. The order matters. First, the turn. Then the carrying. Then the crossing. Greek eyes learned those chapters as children learn turns of a path near home. The sky was an atlas, a manual, and a memory palace. Hands that had chalked the solstice shadow returned to the same roof weeks later to see the next figure rising, ajar at his knee. Philosophers had no trouble finding a lesson under the sea-goat. They preferred clean rules tested against ordinary life. The figure offered several. Change shape when you must to preserve what matters. Rescue can be quiet and still earn the place of honor. Storage is a virtue when it keeps hunger away from the house. Strength survives winter when it accepts limits. In porticos lined with cold columns, teachers set out such points on tablets and let their students breathe steam and think. The sky above gave consent. No thunder, no omen, Only a modest wedge of stars lifting and a night that asks for fewer words and more endurance. When the days begin to open by minutes, you can feel the sign's season loosening its grip. Frost holds only in shadow. Air moves through streets again. Dogs sleep in sun against east-facing walls. The goat slides west in the early night and steadies the thought that drove the month. The turning has held. The stores have lasted. The river is still in its banks. The next shape waits with a vessel ready. The year is a craft learned in sections. Capricorn keeps one of the hardest sections and dignifies it. A small set of stars does that work in a sky crowded with brighter figures. It is enough. Aquarius begins on a slope of Mount Ida. Grass still soft in late summer. A boy watches sheep with patience, the patience of someone who hears more than he says. The boy is Ganymede, son of Tro, founder of Troy. A child whose beauty moves through the countryside like a rumor that does not fade with distance. He walks barefoot along the ridge, carrying a staff cut that morning from a young ash. Dogs lope at his heels and stop when he stops as if they know their master can read the wind by listening to the flight of a bee. The sky is blue, as if promising mercy. He looks up with the unguarded gaze of someone who has not yet learned that gods prefer surprise. Zeus sees him from a height that makes kingdoms look like coins. Desire does what it always does in these stories, rewrites rules in a stroke, and expects the world to keep up. The king of the sky chooses a shape that will not alarm a shepherd until it is too late. He becomes an eagle silent in the dive. The hawks over Ida know this bird and give way when its shadow cuts the slope. The air smells of thyme and sheep. Ganymede squints into sun, the light folds and darkens, as if a cloud had arrived without warning. Wings gather the boy from the ground. A grip under the arms lifting, holding, never letting go. Staff and sandals fall into the grass. Dogs rear and bark, then shrink small as the world pulls away beneath him. The flight is a long thought, spoken slowly. The boy does not cry out. He stares at feathers, as if the mind can understand pain by counting the small things that carry it. Fields turn to patchwork. Rivers to threads. The sea lifts like a metal plate, tilted in the light. Ganymede feels what every mortal feels when earth and sky spurt too quickly, the stomach arguing with the head. Fear and awe take turns behind his ribs. He notices the strength in the bird's neck, the steady beat of wings, and he understands he has left the world he knows, with no road back. Olympus meets him without gates, without gods. The mountain is a place where weather waits to be told what to do. Columns shine as if washed in rain. Marble floors drink sunlight and give it back as gentle glow underfoot. The gods look up from their cups when the eagle enters a hall scented with resin and crushed mint. The bird sets the boy on his feet. He sways once, then stands. Zeus stands before him, eyes carrying the same promise and threat as the storm choosing its valley. Hermes appears, as always, when the air changes. A messenger who knows which words to keep and which to say. Hera looks from her seat, stillness speaking her disapproval. She knows what has been taken. She does not approve of how. Ganymede learns what it means to serve immortals. He is given a basin of water scented with laurel. He washes the hands of gods who do not age. He carries a jug of nectar, shining like the inside of a shell. He pours with a calm so steady that even Aries lowers his voice when the boy passes. He replaces Hebe in some tellings, Circe beside her in others. Details change with the singer, but the sight remains, a mortal child moving among divine chairs with a vessel that never empties and a face that never shows fear. The cup he lifts is the same cup that will shine as a stream of light in the sky. The posture he learns in Olympus halls is the posture the constellation holds forever. The world below asks for an answer. In Dardania, a king counts the days, and his son does not return with the flock. Tro stands at the edge of a field at sundown. He sees the dogs arrive alone. The cry that leaves his mouth is the cry every parent knows in the moment before facts arrive. Zeus does not leave the wound open. He sends Hermes with gifts to soften the blow. Horses that can run over sea foam without sinking. A golden vine, coiling like a living thing. Versions differ on the exact token. Memory always does. But when pain is old, the point survives. The father receives proof that his loss has been honored by a power he cannot refuse. He bows his head. He keeps his place among men, men who have learned grief does not end when it is paid for. It learns to sit at the table without speaking. Time turns the boy into a sign. The Greeks do not forget the manner of ascent. They do not forget that rain rules the life of fields. So they let the two truths meet. Aquarius becomes a youth who pours water into a river that already knows where it is going. When the sun walks this ecliptic in winter months, wet storms cross the islands. Mainland breathes again. Sailors mark the season when jars in the sky spill and call it useful. Farmers watch channels fill and take the year's pulse in water through stone. Some tellers braid Aquarius with flood memory, Ducavian and Pyrrha on their raft after a world remade. The pairing is natural, a figure who pours, a world that needs pouring. Artists give the youth the profile of a shepherd from Ida, a plain jar in his hands. Mosaics set him on bath walls, where steam collects and drips a mirror of the work above. Gem cutters carve him on stones no wider than a thumb. The falling water becomes a line of light when the seal meets wax. On Roman coins, the water-bearer appears beside a river god reed in his hair. A conversation between sky and ground carried in metal. In every medium, one thing holds. The jar empties in a stream that never runs dry. The figure pours as if the arm cannot tire. The stars that carry his shape keep a quiet brightness, a story that fits the myth. The look of kings sits near his brow, Sad al-Melik, the lucky one of the king. A wider fortune rests of the shoulder, Sad al-Sud, the luckiest of the lucky. A sound sailors like to hear on windless nights. Lower along the stream lies Sadachbia, the lucky star of tents. A name that speaks of shelter against sudden weather. A quick meteor shower arrives in this region each year in late summer. Nights too hot for sleepmen watch brief lines sketch the dark. Later books call it the Aquarids. The ancients only said, the night was busy. Wishes came easily to the mouth in hours like those. Hera's anger never leaves the story. She watches the boy pour for her husband. She holds the cup with a queen's steadiness, dignity as weapon. Poets give her lines with more ice than heat. The tale turns in small ways over centuries. Sometimes Zeus' marriage bed suffers another wound. Sometimes the queen grows wiser and allows the boy to stand, if not in favor, then within the circle of the possible. The constellation does not judge. It remembers. It preserves an image with power even when details shift. A youth who rose from a hillside, who brought rain to a dry world, who lifted a vessel again and again without spilling. When Aquarius stands high above winter courtyards, you can hear water in cisterns and gutters. The trickle-down channels cut in stone. From the age before your grandfather's grandfather, women set bowls to catch drips, cooling houses by day. Men pull cloaks tight, speak of hills greening in a week if the wind holds. Children trace the falling stream with fingers, trying to guess where the river above and the river below meet. The answer is easy for them, everywhere. The cup never empties. The arm never tires. The sky keeps faith with the work life asks for in this part of the year. The old teachers nicknamed the sea. Fishes swim there. A river runs there. A whale lifts its back there. The water-bearer stands among these neighbors and tips his vessel, so a ribbon of faint stars runs away from his hands. The stream descends toward the southern fish, where a single white fire waits like an open mouth. Fomalhaut shines there, a first-magnitude lamp gathering the falling water, as if the heavens had arranged a meeting between a cup and a thirst. Children learn the trick once, and keep it for life. Find the jar. Follow the zigzag that spills from it. Let your finger drift until it touches the solitary bright star the star sailors trust across warm seas. A picture becomes a path, and the path teaches the sky. The jar itself forms a small caton inside the larger figure. 4 stars mark its rim and throat, a shape like a fork held upright. Gamma, Zeta, and Pi Aquarii set the points. Ancient lists gave one of them a name that leaves no doubt of its duty, Hydor. Water. From that little cup, the flow begins. The chain of dim lights demands patience. The bearer's leg gives a clearer marker. Delta Aquarii, a name that sounds like bone and gate. Scat, a star you can count on when haze erases the stream and you need your place again. Other lamps guard shoulder and back, carrying luck names that traveled west with traders. Household charms, whispered aloud, as families lay under winter rain, sleeping on flat roofs, with the sound of water in channels below. This sign reached Greece already old. On Babylonian tablets pressed in clay beside the Euphrates, a great figure pours water that becomes the rivers of a country. The scribes called him the Great One, Lord of Wisdom, Lord of the Deep. The water was not ornament, it was law. It arrived in season and made cities possible. The image traveled west, with weights, wine, and tall stories. The jar remained a jar. The stream remained a stream. Greek mouths reshaped the name. They gave the bearer a shepherd's history and a court on Olympus. But the older memory still shows through like a sketch under paint. A man holds a vessel. The world receives what it needs. Mediterranean weather gave the figure a second authority. When the sun passed these stars, rains crossed islands and peninsulas. Some years, heavy storms. Others, gentle soaking. Farmers opened channels cut in stone. They watched water wake them with a sound the heart never forgets. Cisterns filled. Caves breathed damp. Olives drank until trunks held coolness through spring. Roofs spoke with gutters. Markets closed early because wood smokes poorly in blowing rain. Priests poured water across altar corners to seal New Year's lark. The sky poured. The hand poured. Temple, field, and chart were bound in one gesture. Astronomers loved Aquarius because it required effort. No blaze of light. It rewards the trained eye. They traced the crooked thread of the stream. They mapped the jar stars in order so a boy on a roof could fit the pattern. They noted the faint cluster inside the lines of pearl on clear nights, vanishing on dull ones. And they learned to expect swift visitors. In late July, before midnight, streaks appear near the jar and leg, the southern Delta Aquariids. Old men taught children to watch them from dark beaches, while the sea sang its own steady music. Artists set Aquarius where water was always needed. Bath mosaics, walls where steam collected. Courtyards, painted streams falling into real pools. Coins, with river gods reaching for his gift. Calendars, copied into months when jars were checked for cracks. Customs match the sky. Draw water early. Share with a neighbor whose cistern sits low. Carry a cup upstairs for the old man who cannot take the slope in rain. Sailors used the sign for timing. They knew the weeks when west winds sent long bands of cloud, when the sea broke oars and patience. They watched the jar lift above the horizon and counted nights until the first gales. Voyages shifted from open water to coastal runs. Profits shrank, but prudence grew. A helmsman who had buried friends needed no omen, only a picture that answered his stomach's ache. The jar pouring into the fish gave him that rule. The myth never hardened into one lesson. That gave it power. It told of the boy taken up and given a vessel that never runs dry. It told of rain that arrives when the land lies quiet under bare vines. It told of a father who receives gifts he never asked for and learns to live with memory. The sky held all of it, without anxiety. Sometimes the stream saves a parched field. Sometimes it floods a city. Both truths fit. When Aquarius climbs the winter meridian, towns below shove his work. Laundry, hung at midday, dries slow by lamplight. Hearths burn lower to keep smoke from hanging heavy. Children trace the jar and its crooked stream with small fingers. Mothers listen to runnels behind the house. Fathers tip roof pots so basins do not overflow. Above them, the youth pours without pause. One steady arm, one shining cup, a duty kept through storms and years. Pisces opens on a shoreline older than maps. The air smells of reeds and cold stone. A wide river slides past, swallowing footsteps, leaving only the beat of a heart. Typhon has risen. Hills shake. Temples shed powder. Forests bow without wind. The gods flee in shapes meant to confuse. Aphrodite reaches the riverbank, a child on her hip. Her look weighs choices in her breath. Eros clings, small arm tight around her neck, the quiver at his back too large for such a body. Behind them, the ground breathes like a lung. Ahead, the river offers both risk and escape. She kneels, pulls a cord from her girdle. Twisted fiber. Good enough. One knot on the child's wrist, one on her own. Plain, strong. The thought inside it, we will not lose each other. She steps into the river. Water closes over calves, hips, shoulders. A change moves through her, the authority of survival. Flesh learns water. Legs soften into a line. Ankles turn to a tail. Arms keep their reach for the child. His feet flash once, then fold into fins. The cord tightens. They go under. The river takes them, not as prey, but as travelers on a road. Some say 2 fish rose at once. They shouldered the goddess and child through the current's pull. Silent helpers, fearless in their element, Aphrodite surfaced at a bend. Air tasted of clay and willow bark. Eros coughed. She held him close. She looked back, saw tails cutting upstream, help disappearing into shadow. Gratitude burned wordless. She fixed the image as one who pays debts. When danger passed, the sky received a gift, 2 fishes joined by a ribbon of stars. No throne, no weapon, only a promise kept. The western fish rests near Pegasus, its little circlet of stars glowing like a crown. The eastern fish lifts toward Andromeda. Between them, the ribbon holds the knot, Aurisha, the roke of the fishes, a name carried by caravans, pressed into books by careful scribes. Pisces wears its faintness like a decision. It asks patience. It offers pathways. Start at the corner of Pegasus, drop to the circlet, walk the ribbon eastward to the knot, climb toward the eastern fish. A sailor who can do this in darkness finds harbors in fog. A father who can do this in fields teaches a daughter how spring will return. Babylonian scribes pressed 2 fishes tied by a cord. They gave them to a goddess of heaven, a power of deep water. The Greeks reshaped the myth but kept the outline, 2 bodies, 1 cord, escape as sacred act, gratitude as memory. Romans stamped the fishes into mosaics. Later ages saw them shine in museums while rain taps city glass. Pisces mattered to astronomers too. The vernal equinox slipped into its stars. The first point of Aries lived on as a name, even when the sun had long since crossed into the fishes. The sky forgives such stubbornness. Calendars adjusted. Spring began when the sun reached this crossing. Pisces rewards long nights with small truths. Fum al-Samakamoth of the fish. Alfurga name passed like coin through centuries. Near them, a galaxy. Messier 74. A pale spiral. A sway of starlight so soft it silences thought. The fishes carry rivers of worlds and still keep the knot in view. This season lives in late winter. Rains lick streets, roof edges dripping, nets drying in thin sun. Fishermen mend with waxed thread. Children watch in silence. On beaches, men slide hulls to sea. They pause, find the circlet, the knot, the eastern fish, and nod, as if time itself had confirmed the hour. Markets brim with sardines, with ropes of eel. Women buy salt. Boys carry baskets. Light lasts 1 finger longer than last week. A city feels warmth lean nearer. Poets told it clean. A woman and child chose the river. They tied a cord. They did not lose each other. Help came from the water. Help left no name. The heavens preserved the act. 2 fishes, 1 ribbon. A promise made visible. Pisces closes the zodiacal river. A tracery of stars older than cities. Dim but patient. The ecliptic runs through its waters. Planets pass in slow procession. Roofs glisten after rain. Fields sip the first warmth. Watchers knew its landmarks, the circlet in the west, the fish in the east, the ribbon between, a map, older than maps, between them the binding runs. An angled thread joining the pair, and carrying a single named witness at the knot. Orisha holds that place, a steady pale fire. The rope of the fishes in the speech of men who carried charts along caravan roads and sea lanes. From the knot, a practiced finger can trace the sun's invisible crossing in March, the point where day and night take equal shares. Greek astronomers discovered that this gate slips through the constellations by slow degrees, across long centuries. In their age, the vernal passage sat among the fishes. Calendars and rites took their cue from this tract of sky. The named first point of Aries lived on paper, while the event itself had already drifted into Pisces. Hipparchus set the rule. His observations both matched and defied memory. The sky keeps its shapes. The framer moves. Hellenistic star lists placed the main lamps and filled the figure with humbler lights. Lights that farmers and sailors came to trust more than bravura. Beta at the mouth of a fish carries a name that says so plainly, Fum al-Samaka, mouth of the fish. Another, Alferg, holds titles that wandered across ages, outliving dynasties. A memory of buckets and cords and water drawn from depth. Between these points, a faint smudge of distant spiral lies. Later catalogues numbered it a trophy, a breath of radiance visible only on mountain nights when the air has the clarity of cold stone. Men without instruments lured other trophies here. They learned routes from Orisha. They walked their eyes along the ecliptic to the bright head of Aries of Hamel. They used that line to teach boys the path of the sun, the order of months, the reason fields stir when frogs begin their drumming in canals. Pilots press the same lesson into their bodies. Find a knot, hold the thread, lift to the next torch on seas that test nerve and memory. That is how you bring a hull to a river mouth at dawn, with your crew still ready to row. The sign carried meanings households could use. In late winter markets, fish tables crowded the lanes. Bright scales, quick hands, nets hung under eaves, drying in the thin sun. Boys threaded new cords through cork floats. Elders talked of tides and luck. Women carried salt in baskets. They checked jars for leaks. Priests marked the evening before equal day by rinsing altar corners with thin lines of water. City fathers read out promissory notes due at spring planting, and folded mercy into the sums when rivers had run high and left silt in doorways. Planets stepped through Pisces like travelers using a ferry. Jupiter ruled this reach with beneficent pace. Venus exalted here brightened evenings so completely that even those who cared nothing for rules looked up and spoke her name. The sky and the hand worked together. An omen for the cautious was nothing more than a pattern made visible. Men nets before shoals arrive, turn soil while water still sits in furrows. Launch coastal runs under a moon that gives a line to steer by. Art kept the pair and the cord wherever bonds needed remembering. Pompeii floors showed two fish, a band between them, among grapes and dolphins and anchors. A domestic sea, glowing in morning light. Clay lamps carried the outline over oil jars into winter rooms. Later, synagogues and churches set a zodiac wheel Pisces drawn true in its place. Older skycraft meeting newer faith, not quarrel, but season. Coins from harbors stamped a single fish. Legends promised safe voyages and fair measures. A sermon in bronze and silver passed palm to palm, faster than proclamations in a forum. The image entered habit. It stayed. Season closed its hand around the figure. Winter loosened its grip inch by inch. The rain softened. Hills showed their first green, spreading like spilled dye. Carts creaked inland with baskets of salt fish. Plows cut into earth that smoked at sunrise. On quiet evenings, you could hear water running under street grates pooling, falling, marking time. And above that steady sound the fishes still held their place. The western loop lingered over pewter horizons. The eastern head leaned toward Andromeda's chain where stories of rescue and return waited patiently for their turn. The thread stayed taut. Orisha kept the knot. One single star carrying a lesson for all who lived in hard years. Tie close the lives that must not drift apart. Keep the thread visible. Move with the current when the bank gives way. Plan out together when the bend allows it. And then when the sun crossed the vernal gate, and day at last outgrew the night. The fishes sank lower each evening, yielding the sky to the waiting ram. But the river still ran beneath the story, and the cord still held. And as the fishes drift and the ram takes the sky, the story waits for its next telling. And I'm glad you were here for this one.